It's my pleasure to welcome everybody. My name is Alex Kraus. In my real life, I'm Senior Vice President at TÜV Süd, a global testing, inspection, and certification company. But I would like to say in my passionate life, I'm also the chairman of the executive committee of the International Alliance for Mobility Testing and Standardization. And that's practically an alliance to internationally harmonize standardization for safe deployment of connected and automated vehicles. And again, I welcome everybody. And it's quite an impressive setup. Let's see how this works with this virtual symposium. But let's straight dive into it. I believe all of you are pretty aware that we have a vision that through technology we will reach mobility emitting zero emissions with zero accidents, no fatalities, and also reduction of traffic congestion. And again, this can only be achieved through developing and deploying the right technologies that will either intermodal or through the right functionality enable us to reach and work towards that vision. The thing is with technology, and especially with this technology disruption we are seeing, that the complexity of technology is rapidly increasing. And just to give you an example, so we could talk also about complexity of supply chains, of complexity of integrating sensors into a subsystem, of complexity of validation. But just, I think this is pretty impressive to see just a comparison of software lines, so mission critical software lines in Windows 10 compared to a modern car. Without any special level 3, 4, 5 automatization, it's just a high-end modern car. And comparing that, eliminating all comments at Windows 10 at compile time, Windows 10 has 27 to 50 million lines of executable code. It's all on one motherboard. It's all in one place with the motherboard plus graphic cards plus application. It tops up to 100 million estimated line of codes, and that's all in one place. Compare it to the middle column of that presentation here, of that slide. As I said, a modern car has more than 50 different sensors in 50 different sensors in 15 sensor sets. And that is controlled by 28 or even more microcontrollers. We have several communication area networks on the vehicle, and that all ends up in a huge amount of 100 gigabytes of data per hour. And that is also about an estimated distribution of 100 million lines of code. And a reboot is not an option while driving. So that shows the complexity. And comparing on the right side, doing a complexity benchmark, a modern high-end car has about 10 times more software lines of code than a Boeing 787, 50 times more than a F-22 Raptor fighter jet, or even 100 times more than a space shuttle. And if we concentrate that on 10 million lines of mission-critical software code, it has 3 million more than a Boeing 787 and 8 million more than an F-22. And that shows that this technology is not only complex today, the complexity is increasing. Just to work towards the vision I showed in the first picture. At the end, and we see it in the newspapers, this results in accidents, or can result in accidents. And I took the example again of cybersecurity here, of vehicles that are interconnected with infrastructure, or from vehicle to vehicle, or just from the physical vehicle to the back-end service of the vehicle, the OEM. We see that this is causing additional, and I would say for the traditional automotive industry, additional safety threats. And the question is, what do we need to do in order to deploy connected automated vehicles in a scalable and safe way. And that's key, and that's a key sentence, I would say, because technology development is extremely expensive. You all know that. Investing into the infrastructures like test beds that are required to validate safety of those vehicles, that is as well extremely expensive. And it only makes sense at the end, not only to reach that vision I showed in the beginning, but also to return on that investment. We need to enable deployment of that vehicles and that technology in a scalable way. And at the end, it needs to be safe, because if accidents happen, people get killed or harmed, no one will trust those technologies, and then it's a no-brainer. It doesn't make any sense to develop them, right? One key subject as well is that technology development is accelerating. I mean, we just saw the disruption of technology in vehicles to achieve new functionalities, but on the other side, it's more and more software based, and those developments are not only running not in waterfall development only, but in agile developments like software development is done. You can receive several software updates, and this technology development is really accelerating. It's going rapidly forward in the different areas of the world, and the bottleneck is one of the bottlenecks is that the standards and guidelines we would need to release and prove those technologies safe and release them and deploy them into the field in a bigger manner. This is not synchronized. It's not synchronized in development speed, technology versus standards and guidelines, and it's not synchronized globally from a geographical perspective. So in China, development is going on of those guidelines and standards. It's in Europe, it's going on. In the US, it's going on. So we have a diversity, a vast diversity of different standards and regulations. And the third part, which is not harmonized, is what you see here is a patchwork. So we cannot only deal with, let's say, ECE R154 to 56 for software updates, for lane keep assist systems, or for cybersecurity, because this is only some functionalities. At the end, we want to have safe, complete systems being able to be deployed to the global markets in a safe way. So to cover that bottleneck, or to widen that bottleneck, we need a paradigm change. I'm pretty sure that many of you are also aware that the traditional automotive development and mobility development is pretty silo. So there is no vertical interconnection, or not really a vertical interconnection. The supply chains are super verticalized, and there are no margins left. But we need to open up, and what I want to say is, at the end, what I mean with paradigm change is we need to collaborate at the right points. And I'm not talking about collaboration or destroying USPs or differentiation through technology development. That still needs to be there. I'm talking about collaboration at the standardization development side. And this is why we founded the IAMTS. I will give you an introduction to the team key members a little bit later as well, but we founded IAMTS, the International Alliance for Mobility Testing and Standardization, in 2018. And it took us quite some time and efforts to make it a mature organization, which we are now. And our mission and vision that we gave ourselves is to develop an accepted framework of testing scenarios, validation methodologies and tools, certification methodologies, and the required terminology. And we do that as a community. What I mean with community is we do it as a global team. And you will see that in a minute as well. And that community is sharing best practices in working groups. Georg List will present that a little bit later as the head of the Technical Leadership Committee. And out of that best practices, we are sharing and digesting and processing. We want to ensure, and we are already ensuring, consistent, replicable, reliable testing and support of a global harmonization of standards and certification methodologies. And that is addressing not only the vehicle itself, but also the required infrastructures like test beds for physical and virtual testing and data usage and so on and so on. And I'm really proud that with besides any global crises we had to tackle with COVID-19 and also political crises in the last years, from 2018 to today, we created a pretty unique and powerful international setup with many members you can see here. And I'm also proud to say that many of those organizations are across the globe. You will see that also on the next slide, but are also collaborating despite any crises and so on. So just some statistics you can see here, and I think this is pretty interesting because it shows the diversity of our stakeholders and our members, but it also shows that we have to probably get more members in Asia, as you can see. So from a geographical perspective, we are pretty strong in Europe with 50% of our stakeholders in IAMTS, which is a membership-based non-profit organization. So no one of us is earning any money with this. We are really doing this with the vision and the perspective of enabling new technologies. So all the membership fees we are gaining, we are using to create content, to do marketing, publications, and hopefully to meet one day again in person, as we did in the first years. But we have 50% from across Europe. We are pretty strong in the United States as well, and we are proud having also very strong and important members from Asia. And you can see also the stakeholder missions, so the core competency of our members. We are quite good equipped with organizations that are developing tools, are in the simulation business or in the testing business, like testbed operators. We have research institutions, which is pretty important because we have to do still research work, 24%. And we have expert institutions, of course, as an example, experts in pavement or proving ground design or development, which is pretty important because those proving grounds or test beds are one of the key investment areas of those validation of new technologies. And last but not least, we have standards and regulation and certification institutions like CATAC from China, IEEE or SAE International or VDTÜV, just to name a few. So from the size of our stakeholders, we have startup organizations and small organizations up to large companies like NVIDIA as an example, or the TÜV organizations or AVL. It's also my honor, and I mentioned that at the end, we are getting stronger with each single member that is onboarding. And I would like to take half a minute to welcome new members to the team that, despite the difficult situation, joined us within this year, which is a CICV from China. We have the University from Marmara in Istanbul, Turkey. We have the Transtech Group. We have D-Space, who just joined us. We have the IOTA Foundation, and we have DLR from Germany, who joined us as well within this year. And again, as the chairman of IAMTS and one of the co-founders, I warmly welcome you to the team, and I'm pretty sure you will benefit from the work of IAMTS. But of course, our members in IAMTS and the global community is very much looking forward to receiving your valuable contribution into our working groups, of course. And at the end, I have to say that coming to people is a big fun for me because I'm an automotive engineer, so I like, of course, I'm German, so I have to be an automotive engineer, and that's one of my passion. But an even bigger passion is for me working with people, and I strongly believe that people make the difference. So whatever business model or idea you have, it can be the best idea or the best business model or the best idea, like something like an alliance for mobility testing and standardization. It's the people that make the difference. Without the right people, it is all nothing. And with the right people, it's everything. And so give me another 2 to 5 minutes time to introduce you the senior leadership team. And that's a special pleasure for me because all those people I'm going to introduce now are really making a big difference and are next to their daily jobs contributing to IAMTS in their free time, lifetime, I would say, during nights, during weekends, during holiday. And the first one I would like to mention is Professor Dr. Wu from Qatar. He's the Vice President of Qatar, based in China, and he's my very valuable Vice Chairman of the Executive Committee of IAMTS. And you can see his personal statement, and you see also his contact data. So very valuable and proud having such a high-ranking member of Qatar on board. I also would like to give a big thank you and introduce you Shuai, who is our representative of Qatar in the Executive Committee. And I know he has always a little bit painful meetings because it's the big issue you are having when you're working globally, that someone always have to pay the price of having meetings at night, so night shift meetings. And most of the times this is Shuai and his colleague Bolin. So thank you. And it's really a pleasure having you on board. And I also would like to introduce you the head of the TÜV Association, Richard Goebbels, always a big supporter of not only myself, but also of IAMTS. And I'm also proud having him in the leadership team, because that brings all the different TÜV organizations under one roof and makes sure we can speak with one voice, which is crucial for IAMTS. So, and he is the representative of strategic member of the VD-TÜV Association, as I said, and also the link to the CETA, which is the Global International Motor Vehicle Inspection Committee. And this is actually a globally acting committee dealing with how to validate and safety of automated and connected vehicles, or of vehicles itself, across the whole life cycle. And one of, I have to say, from the first minute, supporter and co-founder of SAE, not of SAE, but of IAMTS, is John Tininelli. He's a co-founder of IAMTS. In 2018, we met first time, and instantly we said, let's do this with IAMTS. And he's our secretary and treasurer, and also to John, who cannot be here at the moment due to an injury, but I'm pretty sure he will join us later. He's representing SAE International and giving great contribution to the IAMTS team. And another one I would like to introduce is Hermann Brandt from IEEE, and he is representing IEEE as operationally in our leadership team. Konstantinos Karachalios, board member of IEEE. I'm going to meet him today, by the way, as well this evening. He is also contributing on a membership level. And Georg is also running working group 4 as a vice leader, and supports Georg as the vice chairman of the technical leadership committee. And pretty, I have to say, also an honor for me to also introduce Dr. Joachim Teiber. He's the founder of IAMTS. He had the original idea. I can very well remember when he called me in 2018, and we met, I think, in 2016 first time, and he called me and said, Alex, I have an idea, so let's do something together. And this was the birth minute of IAMTS. And he's representing not only as a founder himself, of course, as a strong contributor, but also ITIC. And by the way, ITIC and Joachim were together with Pete from SAE IDC preparing and doing all the administration and preparation of this meeting here, of this symposium. So last but not least, I would like to introduce you Georg List. He's the head of corporate strategy of AVL, a very well-known organization. And he's also someone who joined from almost the first day and supported the idea of IAMTS and the progress of IAMTS. And he's the chairman of the Technical Leadership Committee. And this is the point of time where I want to say, before I hand over Georg, there are many more people that are contributing. I hope for your understanding that I can, even I would love to do so, cannot introduce everybody here, but we will share the presentations you see today, and you can see all the details about the key contributors in that presentation slide deck. So Georg, that's
Yeah,
now
thanks,
my
Alex.
final word, and I hand over to you and stop sharing. So I hope that this goes smooth now with sharing your
Yeah,
screen.
I already started sharing. So let's see if my screen comes up. I will try that again.
At least I can see you.
Good.
All right, here we go.
See my slide?
Your stage, Georg.
Oh, thank you very much, Alex. Yeah, it's great to be here. The IAMTS. What I want to present is on behalf of the Technical Leadership Committee, to the kind of work we do, which is really the most important thing, is what content do we produce and how do we produce it. As chairman of the Technical Leadership Committee, as Alex said so rightly, this is my night job, becoming day job very quickly over time. In my other roles, I'm at AVL in Austria, responsible for corporate strategy, also for testing of ADAS for research and technology. And I would want to also reflect on what Alex has shown before. I'm really, really grateful and really excited to work with members who are really experts, who have deep expertise, have a cross-regional perspective, that they want to bring in and that they want to also bridge between regions, and that drive solutions. This is really what we are all about, and it is gratifying to be working on that. What I'd like to do is just show you in a few sentences or in a few slides where we came from, the challenges that we saw out there to tackle, and a little bit how we are tackling them, and then come to kind of for a working group. Now, when we started out in 2018, we did realize that big areas that challenged the whole industry, all the members, and that we felt very strongly about that needed addressing. One is physical testing world, proving grounds, test beds, etc. The second one is obviously there is a lot of simulation, and data is of utmost importance. The whole ADAS validation area is something that's very scenario based. That is we approach. Thirdly, we need to move into something that is for highly automated vehicles. We need to move into certification. Very difficult, and I'll highlight a few issues that we identified early on. It's interesting because these issues change. These issues change very dynamically, also in part because of the work we do. But if we start with the physical testing world, there is a lot of proving ground, and very very sophisticated and well-established proving grounds. But it's hard to know what are the world, where to do which kind of testing. So there is very little transparency and comparability, and eventually organization and certification. If we look at the data and the scenario world, the use of scenarios as such is a challenge. And then also topics with the data, the mass of data that we're dealing with, the also regionality of the data, and this cross-regionality that also pops up. Different regions look at data and scenarios somewhat differently, and that doesn't make all our lives, as members, but also practitioners in this ADAS area, it doesn't make our lives easier. And finally, we will have to come viable certification scenarios for highly automated vehicles, and that includes type scenario, but also the periodic inspection. That includes how is simulation going to figure in this world of certification, because it is a very important element of validation. And also how we're going to deal with cybersecurity in the realm of ADAS certification. Now, nevertheless, nearly the most important thing is time and again in our rounds at IAMTS, where different stakeholders sit together from different regions and compare notes and compare practices. One of the key drivers of complexity and costs that is also slowing us down is the cross-regional differences. And this is something where the life kicks in of our working groups that recruit themselves from the different regions and from different expertise areas and try to address this. I mean, at the end of the day, global is very important to a technology as Alex already described it. If we don't have global reach and global scale, then this is not going to pay for itself. And solutions to this, to how to deal with the regional differences. Now, how structured ourselves from these three areas that I was talking about before, plus the cross-regionality, working groups. And four working groups that you see on this page. And I'll start quickly by introducing those four, but I won't take the dynamite in the content of the working groups, because they are going to present themselves as work group leaders later on, but also so if we look at working group 1, then there we deal with this data world, the scenario world, and we were thinking about what is it that we can do about global test scenarios and libraries, and how can we bridge differences between different types, also different types of how data is kept and used. And here are leading the charge, are leading this work group, and you will see Bolin later on in about 2 and a half talk about his content. The second working group deals with this physical testing. So we thought it is a good idea to start with creating a database of proving, and we want to describe the competencies of proving ground. And if you think about, and if you describe, and if you find for proving grounds, then you're very quickly in finding parameters that eventually also lead to certification. So this is a team here has worked on a very sophisticated and smart way of characterizing competencies that different proving grounds can offer to users. This one is led by Kay, who is going to talk about this from TÜV from BL is leading the third working group that is dealing with simulation and how it's to this real test, the physical testing. But they started out with about even the and how the simulation process can be verified up to the point of being audited, and with a very successful already branching out and communicating into the regulatory world, which Tobias is going to talk about later on. Working group 4, we found it more recently, really looking across scenarios, across test proving grounds, across the simulation. How do we insert cybersecurity into these? And what do we? Cybersecurity is recognized as the important element that it will become in highly automated vehicles, as they have vectors to introduce faults and actually make a big danger of highly automated vehicles. So this is led by our colleagues from Israel, Eddie from Cybellum, who who will be talking about this and introducing. And the fifth one, I did want to mention this, is not a working group yet, but it's a project that really deals with direct certification of highly automated vehicles. Richard Goebbels was mentioned before. The VD-TÜV is taking the lead on this one. 4 working groups and a study group, soon to be a working group. And this is what we want to do as a technical leadership and in the working groups. Our objectives really are, we have members with a lot of expertise. This is what we want to build on. And they have experiences of how to do things. So first of all, we came up we came together as members and said, what are the most difficult things that we need to tackle? And let's pick those challenging topics that really have an impact also on us. And the second, in each of the working groups, we realized very early on, we need to collaborate across regions. Like Alex said, very painful to do because somebody always has to get a very close. But that's the value driver that we really can bring. Then you see here also that when experts come together and discuss how they are doing different things, then they come up with their current practices. And since they have a lot of expertise, we're learning from each other, but we're also extracting best practices and trying to communicate those. And that gives the possibility to drive what we call practicable harmonization. And that we want to feed into standardization and certification. This is really the objective that we have as technical leadership committee, and the working groups are working towards these goals. Now, if we look at the going to do next, and this is 21 still for the remainder and 22, there's a lot of publications that are that we're going to launch. Some have. As I said, further topics in the working groups will pick up. So we're always extending the that we find into the working groups and tackling those. We will start pushing content together with a specific working group, and then continue to bring harmonization content into regulatory steps. We have members that are involved in all over the world, and this is a good route for IAMTS content to be also adopted into regulatory. And we've had good progress on ASAM, on UNECE, also working with various other regulatory bodies already to practicable harmonization that we see from industry into these rounds. And then finally, Joachim is going to talk about later on. We've also constructed our own roadmap and are keeping this updated. So I call it a dynamic roadmap. But obviously, we make progress along this roadmap that we see for the coming years. How to tackle the challenges that testing and standardization of mobility. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Georg.
Joachim,
The next speaker should be, is Philip Schreiner. Do we have him?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Georg. Do we have Philip? Let's see. Let's see. We have to see. Can I ask Philip Schreiner to join? I have to ask him via chat.
platform that makes it
That
fun
makes
and
it
challenging.
Yeah, yes. It's,
It's not an autonomous. It's not.
No.
We
Let's
have
see.
Alex back.
Alex, can you tell us where Philip is?
Well, I can see him, so he is online, but whatever the reason is, maybe we can.
We can maybe check.
Maybe we move to the next agenda point, and I will get Philip through phone.
Yes.
So we just change the presentation of Philip and Barnaby.
Okay. Is Barnaby there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, Barnaby. Okay.
All right, and Manuel.
Then we will take you first and Manuel, so as you're there.
Yes.
Great.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Brief introduction. So I'm Barnaby Simpkin, Head of Regulatory Affairs at NVIDIA. I've been a member, NVIDIA has been a member of IAMTS for just under a year now. I'm working in a number of groups on scenarios and in correlation of virtual testing. Very happy to see the progress that's been made so far by IAMTS. We've gone from very much the concept phase on how to validate a tool chain within this working group all the way to getting something concrete at the UNEC working draft on virtual testing. So I'm very pleased to see how IAMTS has taken concepts and really run with the ideas, and I think the people that we have involved at IAMTS can help facilitate that. It is really a melting pot of experts around the world. So and Tobias will go into more detail about that.
Barnaby, can you check also your video so we don't see you unless you have switched
okay.
it off.
Let me try that 1 sec. I'll share my screen, then Manuel can do an intro.
Yes.
Oh.
Nope.
I'm not going to do an intro.
I can also share if you want.
Okay. I think we're seeing your screen. Okay.
Yep, you see it?
Yes, and if you could call on presentation mode, perfect. Thank you. So.
Great. Okay, Manuel, go ahead.
Yeah, I would also like to say welcome to everyone who's listening today. About my background, my name is Manuel Rubo. I'm design director for all the test tracks and proving grounds all over the world. Tilke is also a member of the IAMTS group. We've been with IAMTS, I think, since 2019. Yeah, we are worldwide planners for test tracks, proving grounds, and also racetracks as well. With a lot of people here in the room and in this, let's say, group, we already work together successfully. And for us, it's also important to get your feedback from all the different users inside this IAMTS group, and that's very helpful for us also to understand the current requirements, but also future requirements as well. So if we could move one slide to this slide, yeah, as you can see, we have many projects all over the world. In totally 70 completed projects, so built proving grounds. One is the Suntrax Proving Ground, BMW at Sokolov. We did the concept design and the overall requirements collection. That was my job over 2.5 years, so very challenging to run to every department. But we also have to integrate trucks in our proving ground concepts, as you see on the top left with Daimler Wörth, Bosch Boxberg, but also we are on the way in China, where we have different requirements and different, let's say, also styles in the way proving grounds are designed and how tests are also being run. What I would like to present you today and share with the next slide is how we actually connect real testing and digital testing. And there the world is changing really rapidly. That's what we feel every day and see every day. So technology is not standing still, and over the last 3 years it's really accelerating. And also from the perspective of IAMTS, it is important to identify the relevant testing scenarios, what you see here on the left side. We have a long list. Internally, we have different clients who have different kind of scenarios, who have a different approach how to test and how the test programs are, let's say, also are in a row and how they are connected to each other. And after we had this long list up to 10,000 scenarios sometimes, we identify the relevant items. And this is also where the IAMTS group can help and also synchronize what is really relevant for future testing and also to set worldwide standards. What are the relevant items we need to integrate? We have to consider different kind of vehicles, not only passenger vehicles, scooters, buses, but also public transportation systems, not only current systems, but future systems. A lot of, let's say, the standard street items, infrastructure like signs, LED panels, all this stuff that is integrated into a complex traffic environment. Then the surface itself, also familiar for the TransTrack group, especially here, they are the experts in creating roads that are bad, but they need to be really well built. And then we have other elements, city furnitures. We have to build mock-ups. We have to do some kind of actors beside the overall testing scenario. And then we have to consider also the environmental effects like sun, rain, snow, humidity, everything that's related to that. And then we bring that to the next level. So we have to connect everything like a big plot of Lego and putting all these little pieces together. And there we have really the split between physical test beds and digital test beds. Digital test beds we can extend to, let's say, to a complete open world concept. Physical test beds are really limited at first, of course, for the budget. That's what the clients are stressing us all the day, but also regards drainage, regards environmental problems, permission, green issues, simply the size of the available land. So these are the physical limitations we are dealing with nearly every day. But here the digital twin helps us. First, even before construction, we can go back to the users, to anyone, to any stakeholder in this project and see, is this proving ground that we are designing suitable for you? And we can transform this to the real test track. Even in construction, adaptations are possible. And the digital twin also helps us extremely to identify the edge cases. And these edge cases can be mirrored back on a real test track. And I really think that we need real testing to really prove vehicle concepts and trusted concepts in the future. And of course, this can be also done in reverse. So we can go from step 3 back to 2 and to 1, especially here in this group, to identify suitable proving grounds that are existing all over the world. I think in total it's around 140 proving grounds. And this concept also helps us to understand what current proving grounds can do also in the future.
That's the next slide, Manuel.
Yeah, so yeah, then would hand over to you.
Thank you. So yeah, as Manuel mentioned, there's no better way to test an automated driving system than in the real world, whether it's on a test track or on public roads. The level of fidelity is really unmatchable by simulation, but there are obvious limitations with testing in the real world. The resource that's already been mentioned is an issue. The scalability, the time. This is all a real bottleneck for the deployment of automated vehicles. If we could only test in those real world environments, and in order to generate enough evidence that can be given to an approval authority or given to an assessor to demonstrate that the ADS is robust, reliable, and safe inside the entire ODD which the ADS will operate in, we need to have other mechanisms to generate that data. We need to use simulation to support this. At NVIDIA, we use simulation in multiple points during the development and what will be the certification of our automated driving systems. We have the point here, point 3, which is really sort of mimics what Manuel's been saying about doing the testing, both the automated driving system on a track, but in the digital twin, where you have closed loop testing with the full AV stack. This is with the sort of the complete tool. These are either sort of on a hill level of abstraction, taking into account all of the simulation models like vehicle dynamics model, camera, radar, etc., all integrated, an integrated system to test the AV stack. But I mean, that in itself is beneficial, but you can also perform this simulation testing on different levels to generate more evidence and get more confidence in the quality of your autonomous driving system. So on the far left-hand side here, we've got simulation that is used for testing perception. We've recently moved from, at NVIDIA, we've moved from our products called Drive Sim. We moved from the first iteration to the second iteration. In the second iteration, we have high enough fidelity that we can train our perception stacks on synthetic data. And for us, we've mitigated a huge bottleneck in the training of neural networks for perception. Previously, you'd have to get every single frame manually labeled by teams to go through each frame and label where we have free space, where we have other road users, where we have lights, and where's the horizon line. This takes a huge amount of time. And even after a certain point, you can do some form of auto labeling. There still needs to be some quality control on the human and manual labeled data. What we can do with synthetic data training is mitigate or remove this whole human labeling data, because inherently you have knowledge of what is in the scene because you've placed it there. It's synthetically generated, so it's automatically labeled. And with high enough fidelity in the virtual environment, you don't have to have that labeling. You can just train the neural networks on this synthetically generated data. And then we can also perform a number of tests to go through and validate the perception stack is working well. So you don't just use it to train your network, but also can use it as ground truth to validate that your perception stack is working as you believe is appropriate. So you can test perception in isolation. You can also test path planning and control in isolation, and you can assume perfect perception. You can have what we call ground truth sensors. So it assumes that the ADS and the sensors can detect the other road users that aren't perhaps occluded. You can do this in a closed loop manner. You can iterate your tests and really train and validate your path planning and control algorithms in this setup. So you can assess planning and control in isolation, perception in isolation. You can do the full AV stack You can do that with your digital twin on a test track. You can do the digital twin in the real world. You can compare your results as well, running the same tests in the real world. But you can also use this to test in environments that may not be you may not able to replicate on a test track because of limitations in environmental conditions, or because you don't want to test the ADS performing critical maneuvers in the real world. You may not have perhaps appropriate test targets. Test targets can't run necessarily above 60, 70 kilometers an hour because the impact would damage the vehicle, things like that. And this full AD stack can really supplement that track testing that is done. Then finally, on the far right-hand side, we've also got what we call a virtual vehicle. So we're not just looking at the ADS with its perception, with its control algorithms, but also what is the human experience when they may not interact with the automated driving system. And you can have what the driver sees to be displayed, and you can do some quality control on what the HMI looks like, and how the driver monitoring system works, and what is the UX and the UI design in that human interaction. So we believe that having these 4 sort of iterative steps, in addition to all the track testing and real world testing that we will be doing, would help mitigate the limitations that you have in real world testing, but sort of supplement it with simulation and make something that is very robust and can really support the certification.
What you actually can see here is an example, just a quick example, also regards to the time, is the Daimler Proving Ground at Immendingen, what we completely built over the last 6 years. And during construction, even in early concept design, we had this digital twin of, especially here, that called the Bertha area, the Bertha Fläche, where a lot of these automated and autonomous functions are tested. And it's been taken to the digital world before construction. And we are, let's say, also in the luxury position that we can extract this from our construction drawing to our accuracy of nearly 0.2 of a millimeter over 4 meters length. So this is the accuracy we can achieve in comparing the digital twin to the real life. And this is really, really good, I think, from our perspective. And the tool here, especially is for, in this scenario, is not only to train the drivers before they actually drive to the surface, but also to train the testing program and to develop the testing program. And as a feedback from Daimler, this really saves enormous time, track time. That's also costs money. You have to bring your stuff to the site. Things can go wrong. And with this digital twin as a preparation tool, they're really saving a lot of time. You also can take critical and maneuvers, risk assessment out from the real life back to the digital area. You can test the scenario if it's suitable to your test, and then take it to the real life testing scenario. And as these testing scenarios are really growing and growing, you have to test so many different programs. It also lowers the stress for the real proving ground. And that's also a big benefit. I feel sometimes there is a battle and a conflict between digital testing and real testing. I think in the nearly future, they will really benefit from each other, and we will see much more a clear picture where real life testing is really needed and can't be replaced, and where digital testing in the future is really helping us. Also the real proving grounds to host this huge amount of upcoming testing scenario and testing programs we need to face. I really think that we are still at the beginning of what is testing really means in the future. So the amount of testing, and thanks Alex for the first slide or the second slide of the complexity of such systems how complex they are. I think everyone agrees that this complexity needs to be tested, especially for autonomous vehicles. Okay, then I would hand over to Barnaby again.
Thank you. So now going back to the digital environments, the majority of these virtual testing tools are run on game engines. And this is something that at NVIDIA we're moving away from. At NVIDIA we love game engines. We have a rich history in computer graphics technology. They generate beautiful images, but we don't believe at the moment they are fit for purpose with regards to the assessment of automated driving systems. I mean, the concerns that we have, and they're listed on the slide here, is that an AV for simulation tool to be effective for AV certification, it needs to be scalable. You need to be able to run it across multiple GPUs with different sensor configurations and across multiple GPU nodes. This isn't possible with the game engine. And even though the game engine is able to create a very beautiful looking virtual environment, that's not necessarily what we need for AV simulation. We need physically accurate sensors. We need timing to be incredibly accurate. Without having this level of accuracy, you generate non-deterministic effects within the simulation tool, and it would really prohibit the efficiency of regression testing. And when you run the same test with the same input, you're tuning your path planning control algorithms, or you've got an updated DNN. If we're getting results that are different due to sensor inaccuracy or incorrect timing, then that reduces the efficiency of performing that test. So this is something that we're really trying to move away from, to enable us to create a system that is fit for purpose. There's also concerns about using game engines with the modularity, with the access to the world model, having the history in different iterations of the world model. This is something you don't have with a game engine, and something that we'd be looking for for a simulation tool. So one thing that we've done at NVIDIA is to move away from the game engine we were using before, and now we've created our own platform called Omniverse. Omniverse is essentially designed from the ground up to be a simulation platform for autonomous driving systems that looks at graphics, but also looks at physical simulations and makes something that is really fit for purpose with regards to ADS testing. It was architected to be on a large scale, to be operated not only just on someone's desktop, but also in the data center, in the cloud, where we can have multiple iterations that will increase the efficiency of testing and make something really worthwhile. With our Omniverse as well, we've also implemented our RTX technology. This is real-time ray tracing that is far more accurate at representing radar, LiDAR models than what we had with previous tools, where we're just sort of rasterizing the images and making assumptions about where or how much reflection may we get from that object. With ray tracing, we can really look at how light interact with an object, how they're reflected at different angles, and have something that is far more usable. One thing we also did was change and we built this Omniverse on Pixar's Universal Scene Description. This is used to be able to describe 3D scenes and works very well with the Omniverse platform. These are a few graphics that we've taken from Omniverse using DriveSim 2.0. You can see in all four of these images how we've managed to model light. On the top left, you've got cars driving through the tunnel. You can see the light that isn't inherently baked into this virtual environment. This is ray traced from the original source of the light. This is something that can be very easily changed just by changing the position of the sun within the virtual environment. On the top right, we've also got an image here that's showing how hundreds or thousands of different light sources can be used and interact with the virtual environment without having to bake this into the scene, as I mentioned in the last point. And then on the bottom left, we've got sort of complex shadows that have been generated from the scene, from the foliage, from the bridge. And then on the bottom right, we've also got reflections from a tanker truck that will change relative to the position of the camera, and gives a very good indication of the quality of the render that we can achieve using ray tracing and using Omniverse. And you can see the distortion that you have on the outside edge of the tanker truck. So in summary, virtual testing is going to be a critical tool to help enable the certification of automated driving systems. Track testing in itself has amazing fidelity, obviously, and has its benefits, but in order to generate enough data that can give evidence that the ADS will operate safely in all conditions within the ODD, we need to use virtual testing. At NVIDIA, we're using our new Omniverse platform that's built from the ground up. We're not using a conventional game engine. This is our own engine to power the platform that is known as DriveSim, the second iteration, DriveSim 2.0. We use Pixar's single unified world model. We have the platform is scalable, so we can run it across multiple GPUs and multiple instances. We can generate physically accurate sensors using ray tracing technology. And a lot of NVIDIA's technology, we are a platform company. It is very scalable, it's very modular. It allows third parties to include their plugins, and we have a very broad ecosystem to really make virtual testing usable for certification. And there's a few links here if you want to know more about what we're doing at NVIDIA, but happy to take any questions now or during the panel session later.
Yeah, thank you, Barnaby. Thank you very much. Because of a matter of time, I would refer to take the questions into the panel, or Barnaby and Manuel, if I saw that Manuel already started questions, that would be great. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think I just got notified that we should be able to have Philip Schreiner joining us for his presentation from the Autonomous. Is he there? There he is.
See and hear me now. Hello,
yes.
Sorry for the inconvenience. I had
no
a
problem, Philip. We were able to manage. No worries. Everything is fine. We have you here. Thank you very much for your presence, and the floor is yours.
Perfect. So let's see if the last barrier can be also jumped over. I'm going to share my screen now.
Mm-hmm.
So you should see.
It's building up. Yes. Yep.
All right.
Yep. Everything.
To be able to talk today. Thank you to the IAMTS team to give me this opportunity. I think when I look on all the other speakers, I'm really taking a very, let's say, compared to the others, a very high-level approach. So I hope that's fine. I will not discuss on a technical level approaches or solutions. Rather, what I would like to do in the next 20 minutes or so faster is to present to all of you our initiative, the Autonomous. So some of you maybe know it already, some of you don't, and I think it still fits in here quite well because we have a lot of similarities also with the IAMTS activities. So that's why I think it's a good fit, and my goal is to address 3 things here with you, and I'm also happy to answer questions later. So what is the autonomous, what is our purpose, our vision, our mission, how do we actually achieve this, so what's the strategy behind, how does it look like in the next years. So with right, so, and I always start with this picture because it summarized quite well there are multiple safety challenges out there when it comes to autonomous driving in general, autonomous mobility in general. And they are really, like, this list is endless, so to say. So there are challenges within the topic of safety and architecture, challenges safety and artificial intelligence. You know, the AI is a black box, so to say, how to guarantee what kind of processes you can implement to make this safe. Safety and cybersecurity is a huge topic on it. Regulation part, sense of fusion, and as I said, like, this list can go on and on. And we strongly believe that all these challenges, they cannot be just mastered by one company alone. So neither an OEM, tech company, or any other organization. We believe the only way to solve these challenges and to make autonomous driving then in the end safe is through. So that's basically the starting point where to initiate the autonomous. And so the vision of the autonomous is to solve these biggest safety challenges by making this collaboration possible. So we see ourselves as facilitator. We are not the ones that will produce the solutions. This is done by our members, but we want to become this platform where this collaboration can actually happen. And we are fully aware that in a highly competitive market, asking for collaboration is very difficult. Yeah. And this initiative, the Autonomous, exists since 2019, so it's quite some time already, where we're talking with OEMs, with tiers. So we see the challenge, but we strongly believe that this is the way, right? This is the way to go in order to reach a certain safety understanding, so a common safety understanding in the industry. And I will let you know in a few seconds or minutes what exactly I mean with this. So, but this is actually what we are trying to do. So we want to really providing the platform and being the facilitator. So this means actually we changed a little bit how the industry works at the moment, and those are the two approaches. Sticking with me since a long time, and I never changed it because I really like it actually. So on the left-hand side, you see the current approach of the automotive industry, so to say. Yeah, so we have a certain corporation, mostly it's an OEM with some tiers, and they are trying to solve a concrete problem. In this case, it's indicated as a problem A. So what's the outcome is for this problem? It's actually in parallel other corporations. Yeah, that's fine for now, but when it comes to more complex autonomous systems, this is not feasible anymore because it's far more cost intense, it's time consuming, there's huge risk of wrong development for partners, for industry stakeholders, and there's a high risk, of course, also. So who then in the end decides what is a safe product compared to other products? So that's why we say, okay, the current approach is not feasible anymore, and we are proposing the approach on the right hand. There has to be a ecosystem at some point, which is the autonomous, and the more ecosystem players ecosystem, the better it is for each member in the ecosystem. So jointly, what we are trying to do in order to solve these safety challenges is to come up with a common understanding of safety, more precisely, concrete reference solutions. Reference solutions are basically descriptions, prototypes, depending on the granularity, of course, of a certain. How can the standard in so to say in reality or in real life? So we're not saying that the competition should be gone. This is utopia, of course, but we just say the collaboration phase will be extended. to a certain extent, especially when it comes to safety critical systems. So when I say we, so who is actually this whole collaboration? So we see the autonomous system very holistic. So we not only see the industry, the typical automotive industry, but also stakeholders from governmental institutions, thought leaders, disruptive companies, so companies that are actually reinventing the way how autonomous mobility works. Of course, the tiers, which are counting into the automotive sector, but also the lower part is important. So also academia, research, partnering, for example, with Fraunhofer Institute and other research institutions, the cities, legislation, and so on. So this is really for us the ecosystem that we want to gather to actually jointly collaborate on the autonomous. So this is actually why we're doing this. And now, of course, the big question is, well, how does it look like to actually achieve this big vision? And I would like to show you two streams that summarizing quite well what we are doing. So we have on the one hand side the event streams, and on the other side innovation stream. Start with the event stream. So of course, having an ecosystem always involves people. In the end, it's the people, it's the expert with the solution for concrete problems, and that's why you need to bring the people together. So, and this we do on. We have during COVID, the COVID pandemic, launched our CHEPTI event format. It's a fully virtual format, which we usually planned to have in a smaller setup, but then it turned out that the feedback was so good that we actually host CHEPTI events with up to 500 participants. And the idea here was first, of course, to get the experts together, so make this networking, but also to start defining possible safety challenges where this alignment is needed, so to say. So we started to look around in this huge forest and detect first blind spot, so to say. On the other hand, we have the main event. The first main event took place in 2019 and was a big success. It was actually the first time that we pitched this idea of the autonomous, the concept of the autonomous, to the audience. It was more than 500 people, and really, leading executives and experts from the autonomous mobility industry were there. Many CEOs and leading experts. And so the next main event this year on the 29th of September. Unfortunately, last year we had to cancel. It's due to COVID. This year we are more optimistic because hybrid event format, so it will be able, so the participants and the speakers will be able to participate either physically in Vienna, so it will take place in Vienna in Austria, or via an online stream. So this is what we do on the, so to say, on the event stream side. Yes, I think I already said that, but it's a good opportunity for me again to promote the main event. So 29th of September, hybrid event, and tickets, you can get the tickets on our website, theautonomous.com. But more importantly, I think for this target group today is what we're actually doing in the innovation stream. So the innovation stream is for us, we always say this is where the actual, so yes, what are we doing? So what is the focus of the autonomous working groups? Yeah. So you can see here on the left-hand side, again, very more or less a development process within the autonomous driving industry. So you have some requirements, you have to define architecture, you have to define design, and later on also, of course, implement. So the autonomous working groups are actually targeting this part here, so the how part. And now this is one of the most important I would like to share with you today. So how do we differentiate between the many other activities out there, especially on the standardization, especially standardization activity, IEEE UL 4600, and this is the explanation. So these standardization activities are defining the what. So they say what needs to be done in order to make A, B, C safe. And what we do is actually we complement this information. So we say, okay, taking this into consideration existing relevant standards, and we are defining the how. So how can this look like? Yeah, and that's what we call reference solutions. So we provide reference solutions for existing safety standards that they can then use and refer to it. So the safety standards, an ISO or UL and etc. They take this information, they take and referring to it. So it actually is an additional information that we provide to the industry. On the right-hand side, you see the topics that we're addressing. So we came up with 5 topics that we believe are relevant. I always say, so it doesn't mean that we believe and that's set in stone, but what we do is we provide this to the discussion with our members and say, okay, under this umbrella, safety and architecture, what concrete topics should be addressed in more detail? What could be a topic for a potential working group? And at the moment, we have from these 5 topics, we have 1 topic that is being addressed within a working group that is safe. So we actually started our first working group, and the rest we are planning to launch in the next working groups on security regulation. The good thing here on ours, on our concept, so to say, is that we are scalable. So we can either scale on the level of details, so we can actually also go further into details, meaning either like proof of concepts, jointly work on proof of concepts, or we can also scale in the sense of topics. So we're not limited to those 4 topics. We can also come up with new topics, always under the umbrella of level 3, level 4 safety. So I just mentioned our first working group, safety and architecture. So this was kicked off on June this year. The idea is to really develop recommendations, best practices, guidelines, reference specifications, technical documents to be released after each working group cycle. I think I have, yes, this is a picture. So to give you a little more concrete, how does it look like when we have these working group meetings? The first working group meeting was virtual, also due to the COVID restrictions. We have over 20 leading experts participating, in total 11 companies that signed the MOU so far, which does not mean that we are closed. So we are actually open to everybody willing to contribute. So becoming a member always means contributing financially to a certain extent, and also with know-how, and also applying to our IP policy and membership regulations. But if that's, so to say, set, if that's fine, we're actually welcoming everybody to join and contribute. And the next meetings will take place in 2 days. So on Thursday is the next working group meeting, and then at our main event, the day before our main event on September 28th. The final or the first report increment will be published in October 2022. So this is the timeline for the working group safety and architecture. So I think last but not least, and then I finished, and I don't know about my timing, but I hope it's nobody kicked me out so far.
But you have a few minutes, so that's fine.
So I would like to give an outlook. So where do we go? Yeah, and therefore I would like to start in 2020. So for us, 2020 was the year of chapter events, so where we actually also grew our on a global scale. So we started with a strong Europe focus, and now actually we're able to grow also in Asia and in the US. And this was definitely also done through our chapter events. Yeah. This year we see the focus on the working groups, so getting the working group concepts out, getting it started. Already ticked this one because we have the first working group safety and architecture, with more working groups coming up in the next years. 2022 will be the focus on standardization. So of course, everything what we do, in the end, we want to put into a standard at some point. So the standards referring to us, to our work. And therefore, we already started to align with them. Also, thanks to the support of we established good relations to important standards, and this is an ongoing process. And yes, the upcoming years will also be focusing on, so to say, increased cooperation. This should indicate that we are not limited to this level. Focusing now, because we also see the autonomous as a platform for further development. So really proof of concepts, yeah, even coding together at some point should be possible through our framework. So I almost lost my voice. I think I talked a lot. If you have the questions now or later.
Yeah, so Philip, one of the questions I have for you is regarding the cross-regional collaboration. I think you saw in Alexander's presentation that IAMTS has basically presence members in Europe, in North America and Asia. And I was wondering, in that distribution of members, how are your members currently distributed? Is it do you have a strong focus on Europe, or is it balanced? So what's the current situation in your membership development?
So it's definitely not balanced yet, to be frank. So we still have the strong European footprint, just due to our history, being an initiative started from TTTech Auto with good network in especially German OEMs, tiers. We have still a very strong footprint from Europe, but we also are talking, for example, with SAIC, so the biggest car manufacturer of China. We are in close contact with them to join the working groups, as well as with players from the US. So, for example, at our main event, we will have Trent Victor, who is representing Waymo, join our discussions. They also are already in discussion for a working group, as well as Aurora, for example, I would like to highlight. So a company I think well known. So we do have, we started to increase our footprint. If I have to put numbers on it, I would say 70% Europe, still. I would say, and the rest is divided in half between Asia and the US, with our strong ambition to grow this percentage in the next couple of years.
And then another thing that may be interesting is that I saw that your organization has pretty strong connections directly to the car manufacturers, and IAMTS is pretty strong in, let's say, access to regulators and standards organizations and test organizations. So in the interfacing to regulators, is this addressed already, or is that something more for the future that you're addressing right now?
So we started the. Are we there? Not yet. But this was also a big reason why the Autonomous and IAMTS will partner up. So I think it's fine to already share this information. So we're going to have a partnership, especially because we see the synergies. So yes, I think the footprint we have is good, but it can be improved. And IAMTS, I think, is, at least from our side, a player that can support us here, and to also, increase the regulatory aspects.
Excellent. So Philip, thank you very much. It looks like we are back on track on the schedule, and you will be in the panel that comes a little later. So the next speaker is Alexander Schwab. Can I ask him to join? There he is. Alex, I think you need to unmute. I think I can do that potentially. So, Alexander, can you just unmute? We cannot hear you yet. Can you try that again? Still not working. Let's see. He is fixing it, so we will hear him soon. Now we hear you, Alexander. Great.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So thank you very much for joining today. So I already had the privilege to see your slides, so it was very exciting. I'm sure. And so the floor is yours. So thank you very much.
Very much too. I will share my screen. Can you see it? I think so.
Yes.
Perfect. So also hello from my side. As you can see from the agenda, we will talk today about how the regulatory framework for a level 4 certification will potentially look like. At the beginning, I would like to introduce myself very briefly. In 2019, I graduated with a master's degree in mechanical engineering with a focus on automotive engineering from the Technical University in Munich. And since that, and before I started in 2018 at TÜV Süd, I'm working in the knowledge management and technical affairs with a focus on the vehicle safety. Yeah, next I would briefly like to introduce the agenda for my presentation today. At the beginning, I will give a very short introduction and an overview of autonomous driving. Then I will discuss the activities in the field of automated and connected driving at the UNECE, at the United States, at China and the European Union. And afterwards, I would like to show the special national path that Germany is taking to bring level 4 vehicles as soon as possible onto the road. Yeah, I think it's a very simple slide. As we all know for sure, autonomous driving offers a wide range of benefits. The most important ones here are that driving on the roads is becoming increasingly safe because of the systems and the accidents caused by human error can be avoided. And another issue is also the protection of the environment through optimized vehicles and driving routes. Also, a very, very big benefit, I think, is that impaired people can reach destinations that were not possible before because they do not have to rely on public transports. They can take their own vehicle and so on. Another benefit is the growth of the economy through new technologies and developments. And this also creates new jobs, as we are all a part of that. But however, there are still some obstacles to overcome for this to happen. But what does it mean from the point of view of a testing, inspection, and certification company like us at TÜV Süd is? So let's jump to the next slide. I think Alex also mentioned it. Today we look at an individual vehicles for approval, but in the future, this will no longer be sufficient due to networking, for example. We would therefore have to look at intermodal mobility. And today we look one-dimensionally at vehicle safety. Vehicles, for example, in Germany or the European Commission, are inspected at defined periodic intervals. And for example, driver assistance systems are interrogated electronically. In the future, however, this will no longer be possible because as cybersecurity, functional safety, and other topics that have not been included in the scope of periodical testing to this day will have to be taken into account. Also, due to the constant changes and adaptations, it will not be enough to rely only on fixed time intervals, like, for example, 2 years. A new car in Germany is checked after 3 years the first time. For this solution, it will be needed to enable and check continuous adaptations of these vehicles. But we can already see convergences and developments in this area, as you can see on my next slide. Yeah, I think Alex also showed it in another way. the first timeline, the above are the technologies. As you can see here, more and more new technologies are being developed. However, the standards and the corresponding regulatory basis to be able to use the technologies on public roads are still missing. But however, the gap here is getting smaller and smaller. For example, of this, the UNECE R regulation 157, which regulates automated lane keeping, is one of the first examples. Another one is the German Act on Autonomous Driving and the Autonomous Vehicle Approval and Operating Ordinance. It's called the AFGBV in Germany. But what are the opportunities for level 4 vehicles internationally? Today, I would like to focus on Europe and the USA and only briefly touch on China. My colleague Joseph will go into more detail about the Asian market tomorrow. In addition, I would like to show you how a level 4 release can look like using the upcoming German Act as an example. So let's start with the activities on an UNECE level. As you can see here on the map, some kind of automated driving is always possible all over the world. For example, for testing purposes, showcases, and individual cases. But so far, there are no harmonized requirements and test procedures to roll out and introduce the technologies across the borders of more than one country. However, the international stage of regulations and standardization is well on the way to achieve this, which I would like to show you in the next few slides. So, as the UNECE has already recognized for a successful rollout of new technologies, it is necessary to define requirements for the technical systems and also for the human behavior. The legal act of the UNECE, it's the Geneva and Vienna Act of 1949 and 1968, provides the framework for this. For this purpose, the UNECE defines technical requirements for such systems in the Working Party 29. Therefore, the Working Party has defined a framework document to create the necessary conditions for such a global harmonization to enable highly automated driving. That means level 3 to level 5. The special thing about is that these developments take place on the basis of the two agreements, the 1958 agreement and the 1998. This means that the created requirements and the test methods can be applied internationally in all relevant markets. For this purpose, 13 key issues were created that are valid for all participating countries to establish a uniform process. And also to achieve this goal, several working parties were established under the Working Party 29 of the UNECE. One of them is the Working Party on Automated/Autonomous and Connected Vehicles, the GRVA, which is the umbrella of all relevant automated and connected driving activities within the UNECE. Yes, the GRVA includes 6 working groups and task forces. These focus on functional requirements for automated driving functions, the development of new assessment and test methods according to new functional requirements, the definition of requirements for systems which collect and store vehicle data, the developments of requirements for cybersecurity and software update, the further development of the ALKS regulation like higher speed, a greater ODD, and so on. And also the requirements for advanced driver systems. But we don't also have to talk about the Working Party 1. It deals with the requirements for autonomous vehicles. An example for this is how to design road signs and so on. Yeah, so far 3 regulations have already emerged from the GRVA. That's the regulation for cybersecurity, the UNECE R100 155, the 156 for software update, and the 157 for automated lane keeping systems. And they are in force since January 21. Yeah, I will go on the IKS in more detail on the next slide. Yeah, with the UNECE Regulation 157, a framework for a type approval of a level 3 system has been created. In short, it can be said that the system can be activated on freeways at speeds below 16 kilometers per hour and does not need further driver inputs. The regulation includes, among others, the following areas, as you can see here in the middle. These are cybersecurity, software update, data storage, physical testing, and virtual test methods and complex electronic systems. The respective requirements that should be verified by an approval authority or the technical service like us are briefly listed on the right-hand column. In general, these are the puzzle pieces that are also intended for future releases of AD systems. Yeah, AKS is in level 3 systems, but it will also be interesting for level 4 and 5. And this missing puzzle pieces is also a part of the FRAV and the VMET, and they are under the Working Party 29, and they are also trying to close that gap and to find the missing puzzle piece. Furthermore, it can be seen that these two working groups are following a similar path. On the left side, you can see that in general, the points from the VMET are close to the FRAV. The VMET has the job to develop a new assessment and test method approach to assess automated driving systems in a whole by setting additional methods to conventional ones. They are adding it. The graphic in the middle shows the overall multi-pillar approach, which is aimed by the VMET, but what does it mean in detail? As you can see, the dashed box shows the new assessment test methods, which becomes the inputs by the ODD description. These inputs define the scenarios which will be tested virtually and physically according to the methods in the blue box. The requirements lead to the inputs for the audit scope shown in the yellow box. Another special feature is that the multi-pillar approach considers in-use monitoring during operation to be able to continuously update the process. In summary, the FRAV and VMET create an approach to test requirements. Furthermore, the multi-pillar approach extends and refines already existing test methods for virtual, proving ground, and real-world testing. So after the UNECE, let's go over to the United States. Here in the United States, in addition to the regulations of the US federal government, there are also requirements from each individual states. The NHTSA specifies minimum safety performance requirements for vehicles and equipment. The manufacturers must certify compliance before selling a vehicle, but an automatic vehicle would not meet the current requirements. But the NHTSA can approve a limited number of exemptions from the regulation. For example, a vehicle without mirrors. And the individual states are regulating the licensing and usage of vehicles. This means that the test release is made by these. But the states should follow recommendations from the federal government. This means that there are no harmonized regulations for automated vehicles in the US that apply throughout the complete country. In some states, as you can see here on the map, AVs are already in use. In some, only testing is possible. In some, nothing is possible, I think. However, there are also some applications here where a safety driver is no longer need to be in the vehicle. One example of this is California. But the NHTSA is trying to introduce standardization and harmonization here. In 2017, the Automated Driving System Guideline 2.0 was published. It was followed by Automated Vehicles 3.0 and 4.0, and the most recent document here is the Automated Vehicles Comprehensive Plan. The goal is to promote transparency and collaboration between business and government. The regulatory environment is to be modernized and adapted for automated vehicles. The aim is also to prepare the transportation system for the safe operation of vehicles on a large scale. Further, the NHTSA created the AV Test Initiative. The goal of it is to provide the public with direct and easy access to information about testing of automated driving systems, equipped vehicles, information from states regarding activity, legislation, regulations, local involvement in automation on the roadways, and information provided by companies developing and testing automated driving systems. In summary, it can be said for the United States that testing of automated vehicles already takes place, both in simulation and on test tracks, but also in real road traffic, but is not uniformly regulated. Initiatives such as the AV Test Initiatives are intended to create transparency and acceptance of the systems among the general population. Work is also underway to improve harmonization and revise the regulatory environment to enable wide-scale deployment of automated vehicles. So after that, let's jump over to the Chinese activities. China first time addresses the strategic importance of intelligent connected vehicle, short ICV, technology in China for 2025 by State Council in 2015. Since then, the National Reform and Development Committee, the Ministry of Public Security, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and the Ministry of Science Technology make series of joint and separate industry strategy, policy, and development plan regarding automated vehicles. In 2018, the Road Test Management Specification for ICV, short RTMS, was released for the automated vehicle public road trial, and in 2021, it was extended to the country-wide automated vehicle demonstration guideline. Detailed evaluation methods were defined via typical AV scenarios in the closed proving grounds and relevant requirements for the public road testing and business mode demonstration with passengers and or cargoes. The next step is to further shape the law, regulation, and standards to support the commercialization of the automated vehicles to the higher automation and connection vehicle and relevant applicable scenarios based on the experience gained during the trail and demonstration stage. But on that field, my colleague tomorrow will go a lot more into detail. So now, after the UNECE, the US, and the Chinese activities, let's go over to the European Commission or European Union activities regarding automated and connected driving. At the European Commission is the Implementing Act. This regulates the application of the regulation 2018-858, which is the type approval directive for vehicles within the European Union. Right now, the highest level of an automated vehicle under the type approval directive can be level 3 with an AKS system. From 2022, the type approval directive will be extended by the General Safety Regulation 2.0. And in addition, a law is to be drafted that will allow level 4 automated driving systems in defined operating ranges. It will be published under the GSR. But at first, let's take a look at the current GCR 2.0 like it's published. Yeah, the GSR 2.0 includes several driver assistance systems and offers a further step in Europe towards automation. Examples for needed systems are the ISA, the Intelligent Speed Assistant, or an emergency lane keeping system. These systems must be installed in newly type approval vehicles as early as 2022. But this is just one step towards automated level 4 driving. As already mentioned, the European Commission plans to publish a level 4 directive under the GSR 2.0. But for this, Germany seems to get a pioneer position with its own level 4 regulation and directive. They want to publish it until the end of this year. This level 4 directive with its scope and approval process and main requirements I shortly will present in the following slides. So Germany has chosen a national single path for the law on autonomous driving. For this purpose, the Autonomous Driving Act and the Autonomous Vehicles Approval and Operating Ordinance, it's really a long name, short AFGBV, were created. It enables level 4 autonomous driving functions on public roads for national series of vehicles in defined operating areas. Within the directive, a distinction is made between mobility as a service and individual transport. The focus of the AFGBV is on test vehicles and less on individual vehicles. Nevertheless, individual vehicles can also be placed on the market. For this purpose, there are requirements from the regulation that I would like to describe shortly on the next slide. So, among others, there are requirements for a single vehicle, but I will talk only about a few of it. The first one is the functionality. Then it goes over to test and validation methods, data storage, and cybersecurity. These requirements of the AFGBV are completely complied to the specifications of the UNECE and the European Commissions. They are not only based on the German law. These are supplemented by requirements for the owner and the technical supervision of the automated vehicle. The AFGBV is parallel to the German Road Traffic Regulation, short STVO, and the Road Traffic Approval Regulation, short STVZO. It is suspended under the Road Traffic Act, which will become an update for level 4 and 5. Until now, in the German Road Traffic Act, only level 3 is written down. But this means that German road traffic law applies in the same way for the AFGBV like on other vehicles. Yeah, so now we have all the requirements. What is the process to get a vehicle on the road? To get a vehicle on the road, there are 3 bodies involved in the release. The highest authority here is the Federal Motor Transport Authority, in German, the Kraftfahrtbundesamt. This deals with the release and permission of automated vehicles and the general operating license. The next body involved is the Road Traffic Authority. This authority approves the respective route. Here, a distinction is made depending on the road used, if it is driving in a town, on the highway, and so on. But it's too time-consuming to go into detail here. The local approval office issues the registration for the individual vehicle, the operating permit, and makes the registration. Simplified, this can be described by handing out the license plate. And after this step, the vehicle can be used in traffic. So after that, I'm coming to an end. I would like to briefly summarize the topic and relate it to the IAMTS working groups. As we have seen, the 3 key messages of my presentation are that the first regulatory basics have been created, like the AAKS as a level 3 system, the German level 4 law, the NHTSA comprehensive plan, and so on. But the gap between the technology and the regulations and standards is getting smaller and smaller with new regulations, especially for EVs, but it still has to be closed. And that there are still missing items that need to be closed, yeah, like I said. This means that we need harmonization to enable the way to the goal, but more and more is happening in that direction. Another step is how to test against the requirements. Regarding IAMTS, can be said that the activities of the 4 working groups with a core task and focus are in line with the regulatory activities. So far from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alexander. This was a really great overview. So I know we have a panel coming up with Carla Belo, so we can save the thunder of questions for the panel. But I was just maybe one quick question, Alexander, if you're still there. Oops, I think you lost him.
Oh,
okay. Alexander, can you still hear me?
Yes,
okay.
yes.
I had one quick question for you. From all the regulatory frameworks, when you look at North America, Europe, and China, is there any way you say this is really more demanding, more complicated, or are they? Is it so? So, what's your kind of overview or assessment of this?
Yeah, I think the problem here is also in Europe we have the same situation, maybe like in the United States. All states have an individual regulation, directive, and then the UNECE or the European Commissions wants to harmonize that. Yeah. Then Germany, for example, is having the level 4 directive. Maybe the European Commission one is in another direction. So there we have to go all the same way. I think it's also the same in China. China is very big and there are all different requirements for the testing.
So in other words, harmonization is the problem, right?
You're right.
That's our topic, right? Okay, well then I hand it over to, thank you very much, Alexander, and I hand it over to Carla to kick off the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Carla, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Can you hear me fine?
Yes. Yes.
Great.
Very good. Okay.
Great. So all the speakers who just presented, if you want to turn your cameras on, that would be great. And I can get moving right along. I have to agree with everything in the chat. I think Alexander's presentation was to be able to see all of the differences, and I don't believe I've ever seen it explained in quite that level of detail. So really great job and really helpful, I think, for us all, and truly demonstrates the need for the work that IAMTS is doing. So let me start with a non-Q&A from the chat panel, and I want to remind everybody, if you do have questions for any of the speakers, please put them there in the chat or in Q&A. Many of them have already been addressed. So my first one is, we heard collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And then in the last presentation, we saw everything is different fundamentally, and collaboration, of course, is difficult. I want to ask Philip first, you know, how can we do a better job of collaboration? Who needs to be involved? And, you know, how can IAMTS basically support this? And then, you know, I'm going to open it up to the other panelists as well.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, for that question. So the first word that actually comes to my head is trust. So I think we have to, like the IAMTS, but also the autonomous and many other initiatives, if we can actually manage to create a trustful environment where trying to collaborate and to an extent, This is crucial, I think. And you see the difference between, let's say, a working group and a working group, right? So if you have just a working group where people sit in and you know, it's one working group more to attend, to listen, it will not change the issues. So I think to have a setup, a framework, a legal framework, so also IP topics, antitrust topics are transparently governed and clear for everybody. This is for this collaboration in my perspective, which is in the end, you can translate this whole into one word, which is the trust. So if you are able to generate trust, this should be possible. But indeed, I know it is a challenge, and there are many reasons why it shouldn't work. And to show that it needs to work, because otherwise, yeah, it would just simply be too expensive and take far too long. Yeah.
So Jörg, you work with the OEMs all the time, and you know the OEMs to share information transparently amongst themselves is probably, you know, more than difficult. You know, how can, you know, I like what Philip said, you know, really kind of putting rules around it, but you know, everybody thinks everything is their secret sauce. How are we going to get them to work together?
Yeah, I was going to comment on Philip also. Make it easier for myself, because what we experience is we have team members, we have members from all regions coming together and finding that they're facing all these challenges. And one of these challenges is always, whoa, you do this differently, and whoa, this regulation is going to be different, and this data and this you know, issue of ODDs and so on. They face very practically what it means to have this complexity, and they're searching for solutions together with each other by first comparing, even, you know, finding the differences, and then finding some possible solutions or practices how to collaborate. And that doesn't mean necessarily that, you know, we're going to standardize, so we're going to harmonize, but how can we collaborate? There's some examples on how to collaborate on data that doesn't go as far as, you know, sharing a database, which is the secret, maybe, yeah. But collaborating on data does mean, you know, you can use aggregate information, etc., to help already a lot further along. So there are ways that they figure out how to collaborate, and I think industry will also look at this regular. And you know, I always technology architecture is different, but difficult, but regulatory architecture beats that hands down. I think they look at how to very practically deal with this cross-regional complexity and the regulatory complexity, and how can they, you know, if it is there, or, you know, influence it that it doesn't become too big. And that's where we come in, and this is what the working groups do, you know, by comparing practices and working with the UNECs of this world and the ASAM of this world and so on, to kind of say, hey, you know, wouldn't this be a practical way of dealing with it?
Yeah, there's also, we definitely had to tear down a bit of the walls that the automotive industry, especially the OEMs have over, let's say, historically. They're all protecting their testing programs. That's what I'm dealing with every day. It's for example, their NVH programs or any kind of testing programs, philosophies they have. They're completely protecting this. They're saying not what kind of surfaces they are using, and we have to also to keep that in mind when we're working on this process. That is something for the last 40, 50 years. These OEMs protecting them this kind of data, and then now seeing the low-hanging fruit, and they have to work together, and this is something that's not easy, even when you are in the working groups inside the OEM. It's like Fort Knox sometimes when you enter these areas, and that's also a challenge. Beside the regulation itself, it's also a political thing we have to face with, and we will also, I think we will face also some OEMs are not willing to collaborate on that. But yeah, that's also a part where politics needs to be also be involved.
Barnaby,
I
did
think,
you have?
yeah, sorry. I think collaboration is key for sure. But one thing I think we can't expect is necessarily harmonization. Specific requirements, functional requirements for and specific traffic scenarios will be very dependent on the ADS itself and the ODD at which it will operate in. How a manufacturer deals with a failure depends on what redundancy you have in the system. Do you go to fail operation or do you go to a fail safe state? This is very much specific to the manufacturer and their chosen strategy. What we can expect, I think, from regulation is a series of high-level functional requirements that will give manufacturers a structure and a framework to derive very specific requirements to their application. And there needs to be this trust that authorities would give to manufacturers for them to derive the requirements, explain their methodology for assessing the automated driving system, and sort of collaboratively work with the authorities to provide evidence that what you're placing on the market is safe. But certainly, as the requirements, even the performance level of these ADS and different ODDs may change. And some manufacturers or some governments may choose to compare an ADS to human driver performance and accident data. And accident data in itself would vary across ODD and territories, and the level of risk that you may expect from urban environments to highways would change as well. We really do need to enable this sort of an open framework that I think does revolve around the ODD, and enable a framework for manufacturers to generate evidence to give to an authority to say that this is safe enough. But I think harmonization in the short term won't be achievable in that sense.
So Barnaby, I'm glad that you raised that point, because as you know, we looked at the presentation that was just given, and as we all rightly know, even in today's cars without ADAS technologies or anything, there are differences and rightful differences between the different regions of the world where the testing is different. So what you're talking about then is, yes, we need some that are global standards, but there still are going to be the regional standards. Alex, what do you think?
I think one very important thing to come back to Barnaby's answer is we have also, no, let's start. Actually, we look on the single vehicle. How's the vehicle working? Is everything on the right way? Now, with a higher grade of automation, we need to have to look on the management audit of the company. We have to look, is the company is working good? If they are on the right way, is that what they are doing safe? And is that safe enough? And I think that's one step we can go, and we have to go, otherwise it will not work to bring higher levels of automation on the public roads, I think.
And Alex Kraus, let me ask you a question relative to global harmonization. You know, we've talked about maybe there's a need for differences, but what are some of the biggest challenges that you see going forward in being able to create you know, these kinds of standards and testing scenarios? What have we already experienced in IAMTS, for example?
Well, thanks, Carla, for that question, and I really appreciate what has been said so far. And it pretty much shows when you ask about challenges. I think what Philip, as an example, said in the beginning, it's all about trust, and we need to kind of harmonize and collaborate. But Barnaby took a different perspective and said, at the end, this will not be it only. So we need to harmonize as much as it makes sense. And that per se is a challenge, because of what we need is a paradigm change, as I called it in the beginning, and a change of culture. Having an industry which is very used to silo thinking and to create the competitive edge through technology and how quick to develop technology and new functionalities and so on. So to create collaboration to a certain extent, this is, as I said, it requires a cultural change, and that's a big challenge. The other challenge is that harmonization is not everything, because we have different ODDs, we have different traffic situations, we have different regional situations that need to be considered and have to make a difference. And that's a challenge as well. And putting myself in the shoes as much as I can, because I'm not a technology developer or working in a technology developing environment, if I put myself in the shoes of, you name it, any of the OEMs or so, they have the biggest challenge, I believe, because this technology investment is so intensive in assets and in hiring and running engineer teams and so on. And they have, look at Immendingen that was presented by Manuel. This is a $250 million investment just into the infrastructure without operating it. And this is a challenge we need to tackle. And therefore, last sentence from my side, coming to a solution. And this is the spirit of IAMTS, which I could say it's kind of creating and running an independent platform that acts as an independent interconnector and is not promoting any particular region or not promoting any particular technology or not promoting any particular tool or so. It's about identifying best practices to validate technology per se as a product. It doesn't matter at the end what technological solution is in there. It's about defining a general framework that makes sense in terms of harmonization. But then we need Qatar for China, Kiapi for Korea, JARI for Japan, IEEE or SAE for the US, to break it down into regional requirements. So you see, it's complex, and that's a challenge per se.
Yeah, I think it's a huge challenge, and how to get the OEMs involved, I think, is a big part of this project as well, because it's going to require good communication, not only amongst the supply base and those doing the testing and analysis, but those who are making the product. And that's not just the OEMs. Now that's a plethora of people that need different companies that need to be involved. Manuel, let me ask you a question. You showed a lot about the physical testing spaces. Do all those testing spaces need to have virtual abilities too? That's my first question. My second question is relative to the design and development of those facilities themselves. With technology evolving so rapidly, if somebody wants to build one of these, how can they make it so they can continue to adapt it properly?
Yeah, that's really the challenge. So the first part is it's still struggling to say, okay, we are in an early planning stage. Let's create a digital twin out of your proving ground. The OEMs especially, they're talking about the budget here, about the planning budget, and sometimes $25,000 or $30,000 is too much for them to create such a tool. But over the last 3 years, it really changed dramatically, because I come really from a civil engineering side, and this industry is sometimes 20, 25 years back to comparing to software engineering or to all mechanical engineering. So, and we also have to deal a lot of times with these construction departments inside the OEM, and it's sometimes hard to communicate. But over the last 3 years, it definitely helps us also in our internal design process. For racetracks, we're doing this almost 15 years for our risk assessment. And here we do this actually to validate also the testing programs and testing profiles. So it becomes more and more important. There are also other groups in here in this meeting. For example, 3D mapping. They are recording existing proving grounds. The second question is even the more interesting one, and you have to react with flexibility. And this is sometimes really also the challenge. You have to act on things that are unknown for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And you can't really destroy an existing proving ground after it's built and rebuild it for 20, 15 million US dollars. So you have to consider flexibility already in the early design or in the redesign of an existing proving ground. And it comes really practically that you have to consider about the drainage concept. You have to think about how to stabilize the soil in an area which can be developed in the next 5 years. So it's coming down to a geometrical perspective to that and to react that. It's a challenge, and right at the beginning, it's always creating costs, and these costs will be cut by the OEM. So to sell them this extended flexibility is really, really a big challenge. But now this idea really comes more and more into place, and it takes really everyday work to say, please prepare yourself for the next 20 years, because a proving ground that's been designed 20 years ago is not the same proving ground that's today, and proving grounds must change very, very quick in the next 10 years. And that's also the challenge, but also interesting work, definitely.
Are you seeing, now that, you know, ESG is so paramount in companies' philosophies, and it's becoming even a bigger part, are you seeing then more companies beginning to step back, or about, you know, the same as in the past? Because you mentioned in your presentation clearly about environmental concerns.
Yeah, it's a bit, so at some points they are collaborating, they are willing also to work together. Sometimes they're also willing to change also their internal test programs that are, let's say, also going back or reflected to the proving ground itself. But it's happened very, very slow. And here is also the IAMTS group really effective to give them a guideline, just to help them to understand what's really required, also in the design changes, in the adaptation of proving grounds, and also to how a digital twin can help them. Yeah, and it was also one of the questions, and a very important questions, how these, for example, these materials, Barnaby is also aware of that, how these materials that are created digitally, how we can transform them and translate them into reality, how we can guarantee that we have the same effects on the vehicle when we build this. And this is also another challenge, and yeah, is coming and is popping up.
So let me just change gears a little bit and take a question that's just come in through the panel, and it's related to commercial vehicles versus passenger vehicles. And Alex Schwab, I'm going to give this to you first. You know, fundamentally today, at least for commercial vehicles, the regulations and standards are quite different. In this new world of automation, and there are some people that are saying it's going to come to commercial vehicles before it's going to come to personal vehicles. Is IAMTS addressing that? And secondarily, is there going to be this discrepancy that we currently have between the two types of vehicles?
Yes, thank you very much, Carla. From my side, I think there is a big difference between this kind of transportation. I think in transportation of goods, it will always be maybe, or I think that the costs are more a point of view. And I also think that IAMTS is working here in the right way, because a regulation, like example, the ALKS level 3 system is actually only for passenger vehicles, but it will be adopted as soon as possible to another vehicles, like transportation for goods or just small vehicles. They will increase and so on. So I think they are on the right way, and it makes not the biggest difference in the regulation if it goes to a transportation vehicle or a individual vehicle. from my side of view. Yeah.
Maybe to add to that, if that's okay.
Please.
I don't see there too much to be difference in the requirements on whether it's a commercial vehicle or a passenger car. What it may impact is the assumptions that are used within the driving policy. So what is the maximum deceleration that is achievable for a commercial vehicle compared to a passenger car? If it is a bus with standing passengers, or the deceleration profile that you consider the maximum within your driving policy would change. And that would change how conservative the vehicle may drive relative to the other road users. And that's where we may see a bigger impact on how the commercial vehicles are deployed compared to passenger cars. But fundamentally, the requirements that are applicable to them, the regulatory requirements, wouldn't change. The max velocity of a truck compared to a passenger car may change. So the sensing system may be reduced, as in you don't need to detect as far because your maximum speed is lower for commercial vehicles. So maybe some hardware changes may be needed, or may be supported. But fundamentally, the high-level requirements that would be for a commercial vehicle and a passenger car shouldn't change.
One thing I would like to mention, and I'm happy that this comes really into the discussion. From my background, I know that very well because I'm also my parents running a bus company, so in the public transportation. The education of the driver or the controller in the future is also very, very important. To pick up the driver who's actually controlling the vehicle should not be forgotten in this complete, let's say, also development. This is something that is very important, and I think proving grounds can contribute and also add value to the point that Philip mentioned, trust. And the trust really comes actually to the end user, to the driver, to the bus driver. If I'm telling one of our bus drivers who is 55 years old, he never trusts level 1, level 2, level 3 automation systems, he says, no, I'm trusting in my skills. And to communicate that, it's really, really challenging. And he has to experience this by himself. And the proving ground is also a big and good way to do that, to replicate critical edge scenarios where we can create this trust.
Yeah, I think that trust element can't be overstressed. And it is one question that I think needs to be asked is, how do we get that human behavior and human trust? Is it a matter of you have to see it to believe it? Is there something that we can do as IAMTS to help with that? And it kind of links into the question of how good is good enough? Is it as good as the best driver? Well, who's the best driver? So, how can IAMTS help with that human trust element? And maybe, Philip, you can also talk a little bit about this and how the autonomous might be able to help as well. Anybody have comment about that?
Barnaby wants to say something, no? He unmutes himself. I can continue afterwards, yeah.
Trust is difficult in the sense that trust from the consumer's perspective, because when we go to an approval authority as an OEM or a tier 1 or whoever is seeking the approval for the automated driving system, you'll go through a comprehensive approach with an audit, simulation, track tests, small amount of real world testing to generate data to show that your ADS is safe enough in what is all considered to be all foreseeable scenarios within the ODD. A consumer is not going to go through this huge amount of documentation to say that, yes, we've considered operational safety, functional safety in our design, and go through this, a huge amount of data. I think what consumers want will be high-level safety metrics of human drivers have 10 to the minus 9 or fatalities per hour worth of driving. The automated driving system can deliver this with a safety margin of 10 or can reduce severe collisions by X amount. But the difficulty is how do we correlate the data that were generated in type approval testing to collisions per hour on real world? Because as manufacturers, we don't want to have to collect millions or billions worth of hour hours worth of data to be able to demonstrate that. So I think consumer trust will come when we've got ADSs or AVs deployed in the real world that can generate through in-use reporting real world data that can be compared to human drivers. And I think consumers are going to have to take that leap that governments and authorities have validated that these systems are safe enough. They're going to have to take that, but then with more real world experience and real quantitative data from ADSs being operated in the real world, can then consumers go, yes, it is a factor of 100 safer than either me being sitting on my couch or me actually be driving a car myself. So I think that comes in time, and maybe a few years.
Go ahead, Philip.
100% core. I also think it's not something that you can educate per se, especially now at the stadium where we are at the moment as an industry. I think I mean, there are initiatives that have the focus on educating the public, so to say, educating them about the levels, about, you know, what does it mean, the terminology. I think this is all good and should be continued, not to be mistaken here. But so people are actually, once it's available, the people will step into the cars and experience it. And then it's very individually. So the more you drive, the more you see that it works, the more trust you have, right? But before that, actually, we have as an industry come together and design and define actually for us what is the safety level we are able to reach. So, and I think so. This public education is correct. It's fine. I think it's not something that is critical in the sense of it's too late now. I think it will happen very fast once the systems are out there and operating. But I would like to make one point. I think it can be also very fast that then you know, big brands that, you know, building up reputations for centuries, for decades. Now then something, this trust is gone in a glimpse of a second. Yeah, I think this should be everybody, especially OEMs. I mean, they have, and I also think that's why the tendency in the industry, you know, the last years was more going into okay, it's not there yet. Instead of 5 years ago, we say yes, it's going to be very soon. So this is the mindset that changed.
There's one example. I was someone told me that's the 737 MAX accident with the MCAS system, where an automated, nearly autonomous function creates a catastrophic result. And if this happens in the automotive industry or to a brand, this is the end of this brand, I think.
Yes, you're pretty right. Maybe I will underline it with another example. A few years ago, I was involved in one of the first lighthouse projects in Germany, the Easy Mile Bad Birnbach shuttle bus. It's a people mover in a small rural town in Bavaria. And at the beginning of the project, the people were very skeptical, I think. Yeah. And now, a few years later, the people are impressed. We get so much positive feedback if you are there. And I think that shows how good automotive vehicle can be and how much they can use in the public.
Well, I do appreciate the panel and all the presentations. We are out of time. I had a ton more questions, and I apologize to those in the audience if I didn't get to your question. But I'm going to turn the floor back over to Joachim for his, I think you have 30-minute presentation now. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Carla, and thank you for the panel for this vivid discussion. So I will start sharing my screen. So let's see whether I can do that. Give me a second. Okay. Working. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen. We'll go on presentation. I would like to give you an overview about the roadmap. So first, I wanted to explain the foundation of the IAMTS strategy. So basically, I started to work on the strategy as a team. We started to look into what are the regulatory and technological challenges of the next 5 to 10 years in the smart mobility world to enable autonomous / automated driving, and how can we from the IAMTS community actually tackle that through a milestone-oriented roadmap, which is related to testing and standardization. So I wanted to look a little deeper into 2 aspects. So first is the technology aspect. So if you look at this picture here, you see that we have different types of vehicles. The black vehicles are basically non-cooperative, could be older vehicles.
Sorry for interrupting. Yes. Alex speaking. You might want to change screen or switch to presentation mode.
I thought I was already on presentation mode. Let me see whether I can try that again. I am, from my end, on presentation mode. Let's see.
Well, probably we have the same issue again, that only I'm seeing your individuals, so the working mode of PowerPoint.
Okay, let me see whether I can go on a different sharing.
Also, Georg sees the working mode.
What I will do now. I hope that works better. So let me see. And then let's see. If you could give me feedback whether the presentation mode is working. Yeah. Can you see the screen? Is it building up?
It's coming. Yes, perfect. Thank you, Joachim. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I wasn't aware of it. Thank you for making me aware of it. So I'm going back to this, explaining this picture. Basically, in the dark vehicles, the black vehicles are older vehicles like that have no connectivity features and no ADAS or AV features. And then we have vehicles that are able to, well, they have connectivity or they have ADAS features. And then we have even vehicles that can collaborate with each other and are able to work in platooning patterns and are aware of each other. So the key thing is the technology is changing. Consumers will buy vehicles with different capabilities over time, and that leads to a mixed fleet. So a mixed fleet in terms of connected and autonomous vehicle capabilities. And this mixed fleet will be with us for quite a long time, definitely over the next 10 years. And that comes with its own challenges. So if we look at the standardization situation, then we all are currently at the verge of moving to 5G connected smartphones and obviously also 5G connected vehicles. But we already have standard developments towards so-called 6G, which could arrive in around 10 years. So that means that we need to look into the standards development cycles as well as the standards deployment cycles, which obviously overlap. We also need to look at the implementation of these different SAE levels, like level 3, 4, and 5, where at the moment the industry is obviously really commercially focusing more on level 3 systems. But from a standardization and certification perspective, we need to get ready for level 4 systems as a next cycle, and then ultimately for level 5. So that standards development situation is very important. And then we also have standards development that link to the internal network in the vehicle. So we have to look at all those developments in parallel. So in the previous panel, we talked about trust at the consumer level. And I wanted here to give you an interesting overview from McKinsey report. So you see that, interesting enough, there is the message is basically over the last 2 years or so, we had an increase in trust, but there's also still a lot of skepticism. So you see here the blue areas. I do not trust the technology is ready to be used. We still have quite a high percentage of people that don't trust, or they think that the technology is not safer than their own driving, or where they are afraid about legal consequences if there is an accident. And you even have, between the different regions in the world, deviations in the answer. So that already shows us we have to deal with different markets, with different consumer expectations, and that also has to be considered in the IAMTS strategy. So another aspect is what has been discussed before, is to understand the limits of modeling. If you think about what we heard from Barnaby, from NVIDIA, for example, so there are still environmental situations like snow, fog, dust, which is difficult to simulate in a way that it really reflects reality. And if you would encounter a specific environmental situation while you're driving on an open road, how can you ensure that immediately in real time you have the right simulation model ready to calculate what's happening in the next few seconds? So we need to be aware of those limits. And the other thing is also that we need to look into what I call stakeholder balance, and in particular, balancing commercial interests via regulatory interests. So what we see is that the OEMs, and we talked about competition, collaboration, there is obviously a lot of OEMs are in this race of being the first to offer maybe an L4 vehicle or a larger fleet of L4 models. There is architectural considerations that are secret, that shouldn't be shared. There's also hesitance to share test data with government or competitors because it could reveal certain weaknesses or strengths. And also if those companies are dealing with investors, whether it's startups or whether it's large companies dealing with their investors, obviously it's important to them to communicate that they have a leading edge to get funding or to keep their stock price up. And then on the other hand, you have the regulatory view and the road operator view that has more the perspective you need to protect the users from risks. You need to ensure that the technology being used on the road is certified against regulatory standards. You should be neutral and not favor specific technologies, so it should be pretty open to different market players. And also you want to understand which are the infrastructure requirements that need to be considered for road safety, such as lane markings and other things. So the key challenges that we have identified at IAMTS that we need to address is the following. So we need to combine the application of physical and virtual testing in the regulatory context. So that means that we are not just looking at the proving grounds and physical proving grounds, we look at the combination of physical and virtual testing. We need to live with the fact that there is an incremental introduction of technologies in connectivity and automation which lead to mixed fleets, as I pointed out in the previous slide. And we also need to see that the vehicles itself, whether it's connected or fully autonomous vehicle, they need to adapt to the changing levels of connectivity and automation around them. So our approach is that we need to have a global approach to leverage commonalities across the regions in test scenarios and test procedures. We want to harmonize the differences in talking to the regulators, talking to the experts, and to develop best practices in the design and operation of cyber-physical test beds. So we formulated the following strategic goals for IAMTS. So obviously IAMTS should facilitate the market introduction of L3, L4, and L5 vehicles according to the SAE levels by accelerating or basically advancing harmonized test methodologies, test processes, test beds, and test tools for the certification in the different regions and regulatory regimes. We need to help find the optimal mix of virtual and physical testing in blended test environments, where we need to constantly update this mix because there will be progress in the simulation tools and the capabilities of the tools, but there will also be upgrades in the design of the physical test environments. So we need to constantly look at the optimal mix. We also need to understand which capabilities do we need in these cyber-physical test beds, so that we can ensure operational robustness, both for the complete system, but also for the subsystems, and very important for the infrastructure side in the different operational design domains. And we need to define the capabilities of test beds that are able to measure the impact of mixed CAV fleet systems on traffic flow, because that's related to traffic performance. So we want to leverage technology to improve traffic flow, but obviously not at the expense of safety and security. So if we are now looking at the strategic goals and the vision that was formulated previously by Alex of IAMTS, what we really address is to define best practice to ensure consistent, replicable, and reliable testing. And we also want to understand where are the leading test beds in the world, and how, what capabilities do they have? And then in general, we want to create a criteria catalog that allows us any test bed that we find in the different world regions to categorize and to assess what are their capabilities. We can help the operator to improve the capabilities, and we can also explain to the user for their test requirements what is a suitable test bed to use. So the key steps to follow towards global harmonization of test infrastructure and test capabilities. First, we need to understand, to establish a platform of common understanding of the regional specifics in driving behavior, infrastructure, safety and security regulations, and certification practices. So that's where we already spent quite a significant amount of time at IAMTS with the different experts. Then the next step is to develop a network of cyber-physical test beds which are accepted by the regulators and allow third parties to test in variations in standardized test scenarios. So in building up that network, this is why we have in our membership base already partners that operate test sites and test beds. And we are, and you hear this later, we are building up a database where we are describing those test beds and try to fill this database so that we have a better overview about the global network of testbeds. And then last but not least, we also want to play a role from the IAMTS organization in auditing these testbeds, certifying them, and also create reference data related to those testbeds. So these are the 3 steps that we are currently following. So based on this, we developed a roadmap with milestones, and I am highlighting here the key aspects of this roadmap. So first, obviously, we need to identify and categorize current available CAV testbeds globally and create an inventory. So obviously, we need to look both at existing facilities. So typically, you look at facilities that are maybe older and want to be upgraded, or those that are specifically built for CAV testing. And then we also need to look into what's planned. So some of these testbeds are not built yet. Maybe there's just a digital model. So that's the first milestone, and we have addressed that already. So the second is to describe the target capabilities of the cyber-physical testbeds to measure operational robustness. This is where we are in the middle of the work right now. In particular, you will hear more from Workgroup 2 about this. We need to describe regional target capabilities of the cyber-physical testbeds in key regions. Then you need to look into cross-regional target capabilities, as well as if we have a testbed which needs to cover certain scenarios or infrastructure components or driving behaviors that are out of region. So as an example, we had some discussions with Singapore, where they have a testbed, significant investment made in a testbed, and obviously Singapore is a relatively small state, so they need to look into out-of-region scenarios in order to sustain their testbed, as an example. And then we want to look into virtual test target capabilities. So that's another element. And then we need to select a minimum number of most relevant testbeds in the world regions and then rate them. So we need to basically make a ranking and an assessment of so that we can evaluate where are the most interesting testbeds for which applications. Then we need to describe the target capabilities of cyber-physical testbeds, not just for individual vehicle testing, but also for fleet testing. So you can imagine robotaxi fleet operation is on the list of for fleet operators. So they need to test their fleets and their capabilities. That requires specific testbeds. And we again need a minimum number of the most relevant testbeds for CAV fleet testing in the different world regions. So some players like Didi in China, for example, or Uber in other markets. Then we have to describe the target capabilities of cyber-physical testbeds to measure performance of mixed CAV fleet systems, as I mentioned before. So these are tests like where you can try to calculate speed guidance for vehicles to improve throughput flow. Then we need, once we have defined these target capabilities, we need to come up then again with a minimum number of most relevant testbeds where those fleet testing scenarios can be done in the different world regions, and then rate them according to their capabilities. And then last but not least, we need to describe target capabilities of cyber-physical testbeds with a specific emphasis on road infrastructure, the quality of AI and cognitive systems on the test, and specific environmental challenges, weather changes, rain, fog, snow, ice, and so forth. And some of those test beds require quite high investments for the lab capabilities or test capabilities. So we need to obviously then again come up with a minimum number of most relevant test beds for those with these capabilities. Another important topic we need to address is a global taxonomy of the most relevant test scenarios. We have already seen in our discussions across different expert groups and across different regions that sometimes we have misunderstandings in the definitions. So therefore, a global taxonomy is very important. And then also, if you think about racetracks, for example, most racetracks are that are commercially relevant need to be certified by a certification body. I think it's in the Formula One. They use FIA. So in general, if we have cyber-physical test beds and we have them all in a database and we identified all of them, then we go, we want to create a global certification scheme for cyber-physical test beds, which cover then the relevant test scenarios and test capabilities. So this was my presentation, so I'm happy. So I need to now to can to see see here a Q&A. So I think here's a question regarding OEM interaction. So first, what I can tell you is that we are in contact, but maybe Alexander and Georg, if you would like to make some comments in this, if you can join me and maybe make some comments about this.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So addressing that question, which I also read by and Marius Dupulus asked that question. Well, I mean, answering the question this way, that you saw, Marius, that, and also to the audience, that IAMTS developed pretty well. As a matter of fact, where strengths are, and you saw all the strengths we are having, there are also, I would call, areas for development. So, and this is what I called a paradigm change. We are dealing with an industry that is troubled with antitrust here and there. We are dealing with an industry that has cultivated verticals, so being super verticalized in their supply chains and so on, but still silo and verticals. So this is something where we are working on to onboard OEMs, but so far we do not have any OEM on board of IAMTS, and I mean, I'm pretty open on that. And this is something we will improve. We are in contact since the beginning with several OEMs from the US, Germany, and Europe, and China. They are pretty interested, and they are contributing from the background by giving us hints and questions, and we are working with this. But of course, we want to get them on board, contributing to the working groups more or less officially. And that's as a statement. And secondly, before I hand over to Georg as well, we are collaborating now, and this is, I believe, will help us as well with the autonomous. So this is as Philip said, this is as Philip said, a contribution or a collaboration that we are going to build up with the autonomous, to build a link to the OEMs. And we have a collaboration with Ed Straub and the AVSC, which is a program under SAE ITC, where we see OEMs collaborating on safety architecture. So we try to tackle that point through collaboration with other consortia and alliances. And last but not least, not to forget, we also have a close collaboration with ASAM, where we see, as an organization, as IAMTS, where we see practically all OEMs on board.
And then, Alex, if I can just add, what we have seen, that the OEMs in general are conservative with new consortiums. They want to see how they develop. Are they for real? Are they growing? And so I think at the moment, through what Alex said, and Georg, let you speak in a second. So where I think the OEMs are already feeling quite confident that we got feedback from them that we are on the right track, and that the topics that we are addressing are in their interest. But Georg, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more your view on the OEM side.
Yeah, I think the exchange with the OEMs on the content is going okay. It's going fine, and we get good input, as you said, and that is very important for our work. There seems to be still kind of a OEM type consortium and a non-OEM type consortium, and we center our membership and expertise, the certificating regulatory tools, simulation, etc., etc. We want to involve OEMs, and we'll do that also. But they also don't want to be influencing the things that IAMTS and Qatar and TÜV and so on will bring to bear. So it's a bit of a standoff in the middle of Corona where nobody was moving. I think on the right track content-wise, but structurally we need OEMs to be really first part, in the working groups, working with us, and not just an exchange between working groups and the OEMs.
And then through Corona, as you mentioned that, Georg, there was obviously, as you all know, a lot of OEMs were not allowed to spend anything, so they were very minimalistic in their spending, and joining a consortium was then not the highest priority to survive Corona. So that was also something that we had to tackle with, but I think it's on a good way now. So I would suggest, it looks like we are pretty good in time, that we would then go to the next agenda item, which is the overview about the different working groups. Georg, you are leading the technical leadership committee, so maybe you can start kicking that off.
I hope I'm going to unceremonially exit pretty quickly. We're going now from one team to the other. Bolina is going to start with working group 1 on scenario database, and I think so going to orchestrate. So now is some firework on content. That's great. Bolin.
Hello. Yeah. Hi.
And again, somebody who has to do this in the middle of the night. So thank you, Bolin.
Yeah, no worries.
The usual pay cross no work. Thanks.
Yes. So, but I'm just very glad I can just do this presentation. Let me share the screen quickly. Should be on this one. There you go. Okay. Right. So we're towards the end of this discussion, which I really enjoyed. A lot of things being popped up, and the reason why I like personally very much is other reason is because working group 1 actually reaching a point where the first year of discussion already being wrapped up. So that means new ideas and new thoughts and new discussion should be encouraged in working group 1, and also the OEM thing could be a very good point, where working group 1 can move forwards for the next part. But just as a beginning, I can skip this one. So why do we kick starting with the working group 1? So knowledge-wise,
I'm sorry, I can't see your screen. Could you might have to reshare again, like everybody. And please go presentation mode. Thank you.
No worries. Let me try again. See if this works. Is this showing right now? All right, make sure I try
presentation mode if you could. It's a little hard to read. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So so working group 1, the motive and challenge was starting with.
Sorry, Bullet. Sorry, we still can't see it in presentation mode. Sorry.
Okay.
Try again.
Maybe I should share the.
What I have done, I shared my whole screen, and that seemed to work.
Okay, right. I should stop sharing the window part. So sharing the whole screen. Maybe this works. Is it working?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So just continue where I was with before. So the challenge and motive was we're looking for, how do we talk on a global scale? The people, when we talk about scenarios, are addressed it differently regionally, in different areas. So that thing's done. Of course, when we also talk about scenarios, we talk about virtually difference and physically difference, and then we see all the collides between all this understanding. That's where Joachim was mentioning about the global taxonomy, which is really required in this kind of stuff. So at the start of this working group 1, I let it spin off. I listened to what everyone is doing on their side. You can see a lot of things are working in different kind of pace, and people are working on different areas and specifically. But at the end of the day, the thing is, working group 1 should deliver something that could be used and could be shared on a global scale, and that could be applied to different kind of data, etc., etc. So that's one thing we're focusing on. So we're trying to align with different kind of definitions of scenarios and definitions of maneuvers, and all those things could be produced on a global scale. The second part, of course, we're looking for how do we use the scenarios, right? So the topic of the working group 1 shifted from align with the definitions to what do we do with them, right? So how do we test it? And there are differences. We're talking about testing with level 2, testing with level 4. They're quite crucially different, and this kind of differences leads to the next part, which how do we link to ODDs, and those things are brought up to the working group 1 meetings, etc., etc. And lastly, of course, there are participants in working group 1 that are running a physical test bed, and there are people doing a lot of virtual testings, and those things in that kind of way as well. So that was the idea. So we started to say, what kind of stuff should we done at the end of the day for this working group. So one thing is definitely we're looking for an overview with the harmonization as in our heads, and worldwide, and also scenario levels in different regions. And this could be applied in developing phase and testing phase. So there are people who are using scenarios in their developing ways, and there are people using them in validation verifications, and that could be quite different. And we're looking for the scenarios that can apply both in the developing phase and the testing phase. Of course, no matter what you're doing with this idea, either you're applying the procedures from SOTIF or from scenario-based testing, we're talking about safety assessment. Then we're talking about what kind of metrics and what kind of criteria we should be interested at, and this kind of thing should be involved in this working group as well. And that was also part of the ideas and topics inside of this. And of course, at the end of the day, those things should be applied. If you go up, it should be applied for regulatory support. If you go down, it should be embedded into different tool chains and different kind of environments, testing procedures, and that could be the things we also are looking at. But at the start of this whole conversation, everyone has agreed, everyone's happy about this because scenario is absolutely essential for generating test case. So from that part, we're looking at how they were using it at the back end of this developing phase, and this is done by numerous kind of examples are what we do. And there is some part of in the positioning paper that will be presented in the paper. And of course, once we've done that part, we have to go back to the whole thing and doing this system specifications and doing this kind of validation part. But that is not yet done. And this is something we're actually looking forward to involving more discussion in working group one that, how this is actually done. And then we wish through the whole process we can have a best practice for this global knowledge on scenarios. Working group one right now actively having 7 participants. Yes, you can see there. So Qatar, from where I was from, of course MCity, NVIDIA, CAR, AVL, TNO, and DLR. And those companies, and you can see they're pretty spread out in different kind of regions and areas, and also their expertise, and that's actually very useful for this whole discussion. But we actually see more companies actually are involving in the phase 2, which is starting from this I think July. That was the second part of this working group, and there are more people involving, and that actually caused some some pain in my actually not pain, but some issues in my working in my position paper. That is, there are so many topics that are actually going through with this. So this is the basic. At the end of the day, this is the skeleton of the first working group position paper. This is the thing already covered. I just try to go through swiftly because this is not yet settled, but this is something we're actually been done for the first year. In general, we're looking for test scenario developments on the global level. We're talking about typical scenarios and cases, edge cases, different scenarios, and on the global scale, what they use for and then what kind of stuff they're doing. And then we're focusing a lot on level 4 because this is something I actually mentioned earlier. I think level 2 is a little bit, the scenarios for level 2 are very limited, and that thing is not very useful for a lot of testings in general. And level 4 is the thing we're looking at, then that including not only the scenario database itself or a scenario actually description itself, but also scenario using as a procedure and how this can be expanded. So that's why level 4 is the targeted one. And then after that part, we went through general requirements for level 4. So we're looking at different regions in general. That is the main part, which is interesting in this working group. So this is for example the part of the thing we're actually compared about. For describing a typical scenarios, what kind of parameters or what kind of variables are we using, and which one is more crucial compared to the others, and how those things can be compared and how can be aligned in different kind of regions, and how this can be done. So this is the most of discussion we're about in working group 1. But this is something I want to keep going with this because working group 1 also not only focusing on that, we're definitely looking for how this can be testing and improving and using for scenario-based testing. So then we're looking at once we've done all the analysis for different regions, then we're looking at how do we use this in different kind of setups, simulation, proving ground, QView, etc. And this kind of thing could be a little bit different and a little bit there are similarities and differences in the different procedures, ways you're doing so. Then of course we're looking for different requirements, and then before you do the testing, there should be some knowledge you should understand, or you should take into consider prior knowledge to this testing beforehand. So this is something we're actually are discussing as well. Then methodology for scenario-based testing, which is something we're looking at. So, but at this stage, we're not done with the part where all the scenarios are well defined and actually put into a well set up scenario kind of setups, which means the thing we're looking at are more like analysis beforehand, before we actually do the testing. This kind of prior knowledge what we can do for using scenarios and actually done the testing part. So this is the thing I want to kickstart with at this very good point, for people who are actually just tuning in with IAMTS, this is something we're actually looking forward to next part. This is what we're already done, we're looking for different kind of parameters, we're setting different kind of understanding, and we're looking at what the kind of what kind of correlation or what kind of correlation for each variables have, and this kind of shifting and kind of distribution of data, etc., could help setting up a prior knowledge. But we're now looking for, once we have also knowledge on a global wise, and once we set up in different kind of environments and a tool chain, then how the testing should be initiated, and then how this testing should be done in a way. So here is something I did personally. So once I have all the parameter range and all the data is actually providing working group 1, then I started to see if that works in simulation. So people who actually do simulation testing know it's a little bit like this. This is ES Mini, open source kind of simulation software, actually can work pretty well. So once I actually have the cut-in analysis from different regions, you can see that this is the one that actually happen most commonly in China, and then this is something actually most commonly happen in for the European distribution. So that actually I did that part just to show what this thing can be done and what these things are doing actually with. But at the end of the conversation, I think this is the last point I'm going to make before I actually give it to Ke, is that, you know, for this working group, if we're expanding for the scenario as we're setting up, that's where working group 2, working group 3, or even 4 actually are aligned with, or actually pops in, because even though we can do a lot of deep research in the scenario itself, it actually should be applied in, you know, considering different kind of physical testing proving grounds, and also considering, you know, how this kind of realistic of simulation of, and virtual testing and physical testing are should be trusted fidelity of it. And those things are keep going with IAMTS, which is very useful for understanding how this can be applied on a global scale. But again, working group 1 is much more focusing on harmonizing the description of the scenarios, how this has been tested, and maybe even the methodology behind using scenario as a tool to actually tackle the problem. And with that said, I think I should give the post to Ke, starting with the working group 2.
Yeah. Ke, can you hear us? We cannot hear you yet.
Yes, I can hear you. Could you hear me?
There you go. Okay, perfect. Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Go ahead.
I hope you can see my slides now in presentation mode. So thanks for joining, and so welcome to the presentation for the working group 2. So the objective of working group 2 is we would like to develop a global advanced mobility test-based database, and the motivation behind it is on one side we have increasing testing requirements, both in the let's say from the testing development side, but also from the regulation and validation perspective. And on another side, we see there's increasing investment in this area. So basically, physics testing is a traditional topic of automotive sector, but for the new scope, for the new ODD definition, and there's a lot of, let's say, activities in this area to investigate it or in order to improve the testing facility. And also, we have also observed the testing will not only be limited in the physical area in closed testing beds, but also more and more on the public roads, public areas, and also in the digital twins. Therefore, we think we should build a platform. One side, we can unify the description of the test beds, including the physical, but also the open test beds. On another side, the test beds user can access this test beds digitally through our database or this platform, and find which kind of test beds globally match to his requirements specific to develop a specific autonomous driving features. So here you can see the current active members in our working group 2, and we are now extending our working group in order to get more and more test beds on our boat. So we have said working group 2, we don't want to develop any new requirements or any new regulation standards. So we want to use the existing standards and regulations and to develop some industry general accepted rules of our specification, and we call it as a working group 2 specification. And in this specification, we want to describe the testing tracks and their facilities, including the closed test beds, but also the open test beds. And in order also to identify the interesting from the industry side and build this platform, we are also publishing our white book from our perspective, and to demonstrate our database. We have already implemented a web-based database, and there we have already registered more than 70 test beds globally in our database, and using the unified feature description. Here you can see we have also consolidated more than 20 standards and regulations, and in order to have a structure, how can we describe the testing tracks, test tracks, and test facilities. And on the left side, you can see the top level specification. So we define a different subcategories, and within these subcategories, we have also defined more details features. How can we describe the testing beds? For example, physical infrastructure is including the roadway types, surfaces or edges, geometry description. The digital information is to include for example, the basic map database or map information, or the dynamic traffic information. If for the let's say test tracks or the proving ground can offer such kind of services. And also for the service like the rooms, hotels, and the internet, we try also to bring the specification in a unified format. Here you can see a screenshot of our current implementation. As you see, we have already registered 76 proving grounds in our database. And the specification is which is used to describe the proving grounds come from our working group. And on the right side, you can see the data element like the vehicle types, cycle length, and so on. And we have also implemented some advanced filtering functionality in our database that we can help the customer or the potential customer to find their proving ground easily. So we see such kind of stakeholder are relevant for our working groups. One side is the testbed user, yeah, and they can access the testbeds very easy through our database or platform and find the specific testbeds for their testing need. And also, I think through this platform, they can do some configuration, the closed region or out of region validation program, and to find, let's say, a cost-oriented testing program in order to cover all the testing parameter sets. And for the test beds, I think one benefit is through this platform, they can learn more and more the standards from the automotive side, and they can try to describe themselves much easily and combine with the ODD definition and so on. And also we think this is a good platform to help the test beds to define the cooperation program with each other. For the technical partner, we think it's also a good platform that they can find also their partner and to identify the need, like the test equipment from proving grounds side, and to help them to define some joint business cases. For us, the regulation or the certification bodies, I think it's we believe for this certification of proving ground should be one part of the future functionality approve. And I think generally we will let's say improve the quality in this area through this standardization or harmonization of specification for the test beds. So I would also here like to show some shorter demonstration of our database. So can you see my word browser? So you can see this web-based database in general. So and we are also publishing this database in the next months. And generally, you can see here's some filtering function, and you can find some some test beds with some let's say keywords. And here you can find the test beds in different countries or continents. For example, Europe, you can see, okay, there's an interactive map, and you can select, for example, Germany, and you will see, okay, directly which kind of proving ground are geometrically distributed in Germany. And you can also, for example, also select some proving ground specifically. For example, let's select the AVR talent zone proving ground as an example, and you can see, okay, the proving ground has the possibility to describe themselves with some text input, can do some plugin for the videos to introduce their proving ground, and we have also defined different of let's say catalogs in order to describe the testing tracks, like the dynamic platform, and for which kind of vehicles is usable, such kind of platform, and so on. And on this site, you can see also select different features and to see the details of this proving ground. And also we are also planning to do more plugin for the local service in this web-based database. Yeah. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much. Hello?
Thanks, Bolin. Sorry, thanks, sorry. Thanks, and I believe Tobias is next. If you want to hand it over. Oh, yeah, yeah. And then...
Okay.
Microphone. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe you should add Jacob and Michael to the speakers, because we will do it together. Yeah, thank you, and welcome everybody to a short status on the activities on Working Group 3, Correlation of Physical and Virtual Testing. We will do this as a joint presentation, so I will start with a general overview, and then I will hand over to Jacob and Michael, who are presenting the results of the different subgroups. So at first, the short motivation, I think it's quite clear for everybody, and I do not have to go too much into the details, but we heard also in the presentations before that virtual testing will play a major role in the area of approval and homologation of ADAS and AD systems. So a lot of activities are going on there on UNECE at several players in this area. So at the end, we all know that this is a major topic where we have also a lot of challenges. What is the approach of Working Group 3? So the mission and the approach in this area. So on the one hand, we want to define methods and processes to enable virtual testing in this area of ADAS and AD. And there we want to focus really on this correlation process, because it's not only applying these methods, it's also showing that we have a certain credibility of these tool chains. What is the approach behind? The approach is to show how we can validate the tool chain. So really focusing on this correlation process and what needs to be covered in the virtual world. So modeling all the things, it's a quite high effort. So there's somewhere a break even.
where you have to decide this makes sense to model, this makes sense maybe to do in the real world. We want to start this by defining recommendations and best practices. So we started to describe a general process, but right now we want to go more into certain examples. And as this area is so broad, we decided really to focus on certain things and start with best practices there. We also want to address global approaches. So this is one strength of the IAMTS, as we have participants from the different regions which can represent the different challenges. And what are our stakeholders or our target group? These are, on the one hand, vehicle manufacturers and suppliers, infrastructure operators and infrastructure providers, because they also need some kind of simulation to test their infrastructure or to design their infrastructure. Also, proving ground providers, which are also going in a direction of virtual testing. And of course, we also want to engage there with regulatory bodies and authorities. In the first publication, which is also available on the IAMTS webpage, we started to define a reference process, because the correlation process of virtual testing toolchain is quite complex. So it's a more a process consisting of different stages. So at the end, you want to use your virtual testing toolchain for the approval of an ADAS AD system. But before, you need to show that your toolchain as well. And there we defined, based on the best practices of the different partners out of different projects, such a reference process where we say, okay, at first we need to execute the toolchain validation. And to do that, we need to analyze upfront the boundary conditions. So we need also some kind of preparation. What does it mean in detail? As you need to investigate different boundary conditions like the ODD, the scenarios and test cases, do a system analysis for your system and the validation at the end of the day. You also need to do this for the a virtual testing toolchain, because as mentioned, you do not want to model each and everything. You only have to focus on the things which are relevant for your validation process. So you need to analyze the ODD. Are you only driving in the inner city? Focusing on an urban ODD, of course, you do not need high speed in your simulation. You also need to evaluate the testing scenarios, and out of that, define the certain requirements for your models and the toolchain. And one important thing is the fidelity level. So, and this is one methodology we choose, that we can describe certain or different fidelity levels for the models. And this, I think, it's a quite good approach, because there's not the one and only environment model, the one and only sensor model, the one and only vehicle dynamics model. Depending on the ODD and the use cases, different fidelity levels are required. And then we go in this multi-stage approach, where we start with the developed models. This is something you need to do up front. And then also input for this are the measurement data for the correlation. And for this, we defined right now this process where we said, okay, one part is to validate the subsystem models. And this could be a subsystem in the different areas: environment, sensor, and vehicle. So looking on the vehicle, it could be, for example, the brake system, the steering system. Looking into the environment, it could be, for example, the lane, it could be a traffic model, and so on. And then we said we need two additional steps. So on the one hand, we need to validate the vehicle system. This means not only looking on the subsystem model, but integrating the vehicle system in an environment. So the classical vehicle dynamics testing, which you perform on the proving ground, where you of course do not need any traffic, any complex scenarios, environment. These are quite simple tests, but you need to do it somehow in the environment on the proving ground. And the same we are proposing for the sensor system. So also the sensor you cannot validate standalone. You always have to consider it then at a certain stage together with the environment. And this is our so-called sensor system. So combining the sensor model together with the environment model. And then we go into the integrated system. So validate the integrated system also with three steps. That we say we replay in the first step raw data and compare simulation and real world. Then we replay with the perception, so looking if the perception is working in the right way and compare real world to the virtual world. And then really at the end of the process, doing a closed loop test. And for all of these things, we need KPIs to compare and also come to a result if the virtual testing tool chain is suitable for the use case. And one last slide, and then I want to hand over to the subgroups. What we did right now, mainly in the last year, so as mentioned, we worked out based on the experience of the different stakeholders, members, this reference process already with some examples. This was presented already at the UNECE. We also had a contribution to the ASAM Sim Guide, and I think the most important thing, our first best practice paper, which you can download on the IAMTS webpage, which describes this approach and this process and which is the base for the upcoming activities. And what does it mean, upcoming activities? As mentioned, we decided now to go a little bit more into the details. So to use this process with concrete examples and show with these concrete examples how this process can be applied. And we selected not the classical vehicle dynamics domain. We selected these new areas, so and environment model. And for these things, we defined our two subgroups. Subgroup 1 is focusing on the LiDAR sensor model, subgroup 2 on the lane modeling. Lane modeling seems quite easy if you hear it, yeah, so only lines in simulation, but it's a quite complex thing. And both are related to this UNECE regulation on automated lane keeping. And you see also on this slide the different partners of the subgroups. So subgroup 1, it's virtual vehicle, Katag, Velodyne, and DSpace. And subgroup 2, NVIDIA 3D mapping and retrospect. And subgroup 2 will be presented right now by Jacob from virtual vehicle, and afterwards subgroup 2 by Michael Woon from retrospect. So I would like to hand over right now directly to Jacob.
Hello, also from my side. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Jakob Reckenzaun from Virtual Vehicle, and I have the honor to present our work and also to lead this subgroup. As Tobias already mentioned, we have Katag, Velodyne, and DSpace as partners in this group, and I think this is very nice as this shows also the global cooperation on the ambition of IAMTS. Perhaps Tobias, you can go to the next slide.
Sure.
So, and I noticed that my microphone is working. So what is the ambition we would like to achieve? So we would like to give some kind of best practice example of the reference process that was shown beforehand. We would like to do this with a highly relevant use case, so an automated lane keeping system in connection with LiDAR models. So LiDAR models currently not used, or LiDAR sensors are currently not used when it comes to automated lane keeping systems, but it's something that could perhaps change in the near future. And we would like to model LiDAR sensors and take into account realistic fault effects, and also show challenges in terms of integrating these models to a bigger framework. So maybe next slide. So at least at this stage we can't cover like the whole process, but rather focusing on certain steps of the process. So we are starting with an ODD analysis. Then based on this ODD analysis, we define requirements in terms of what needs to be modeled and also what fidelity classes are needed. And then we are looking into validation or subsystem validation. So not the complete system, but rather a validation in terms of models. In what context are we doing this? That was perfect switch. we can we use the simulation framework from DSpace as example, as they also have these steps of the process: preparation, simulation, development. You can see this on the top, and later an analysis. So now the slides are gone, Tobias. Perhaps you could reshare again.
Should
Perfect. So we use this example implementation as reference, and also to later show challenges when it comes to implement these sensor models we are developing. So maybe you can go to the next slide. This is one of the first examples we have. So Katak conducted already this ODD analysis I showed before in the reference process, indicating relevant areas where we need to specify requirements for the sensor models. And when you go to the next slide, the next step is kind of what kind of sensor effects are needed to model. So as I said, we are looking into different fidelity classes. So this can be, if sufficient, can be a sensor model with rather low fidelity, just simple field of view, or we will also move to higher fidelity, where we consider reflectivity effects and scattering. And we would like to show this in maybe, yeah, perfect. We would like to summarize this in a position paper, or in a best practice paper that should then be presented. So the target would be ITS World Congress, which is happening in October. So what are the next steps? Definition of the sensor requirements, identification of the relevant model properties that we would like to model, and also describe the challenges for model integration as example for the reference process. So I tried to keep it short and brief and on time, and would like to hand over to, I think Michael is the next speaker.
Right, thanks, Jacob. Perfectly on time. Yeah. Michael, you are muted. Michael, can you hear us? You're muted. No.
Try it one more time. How's this?
Now we hear you.
All right. All right.
Hi, Michael.
Okay. Hello. Thank you. And yeah, great to be able to share a little bit. I know Barnaby was originally scheduled to present, but had to step out a little bit early this afternoon in his time zone. But I'm happy to share the work that we've been doing in the subgroup 2. Again, working group 3, the virtual and physical correlation is a large topic. And we've touched on that topic quite a bit throughout today. So again, I'm happy to kind of share what we've learned and discovered in our process, and really have had some great results in the past, I don't know, 6 months or so, that we've really been working and focusing on the problems that we've laid out here. And it's been a great group from the guys at 3D Mapping and NVIDIA and myself, to have the space, I think, to kind of relax a little bit and slow down from having to kind of work in our kind of normal day jobs, and just kind of focus on what are the broader problems, and to come up with I think some really workable solutions. So we'll talk about those here. Thanks, Tobias. If you can go to the next slide. So we want to reference back to the IAMTS process that we've laid out here. We're probably going to focus more on the left side, the preparation of the tool chain. We're not yet currently fully through a complete use case and demonstration of the results yet, but we've done the initial analysis and preparation of what we wanted to focus on. Obviously, of course, in this case of lane keeping, there's some advantages to that. The target description for what we mean by an actual lane is relatively simple. We'll see there's complexities there, but it is certainly, you know, a much more feasible thing to tackle than to say, you know, trying to address detection of vulnerable road users and all the various variations that can have. We're also not going to do a complete validation of the vehicle system. That is, you know, how does the vehicle respond, and in terms of its lane keeping or lane centering capabilities. We're really just going to more focus on the ability of the sort of sensors and the subsystems to detect the lanes and the types of lane characteristics that it's able to measure. So one unique thing that we are going to bring to this discussion about virtual and physical correlation is we are going to bring the actual autonomous system under test into the loop here. And that's really important because when we talk about virtual and physical correlation, I think a lot of us in our minds think of, well, does it look fairly accurate? Does it look realistic? Does it look representative? But we actually need to answer that question not through our own eyes, but through the eyes of the actual system. And what may seem to be very, you know, very obviously in alignment or very strongly correlated in our own perception, there might be some very key differences in terms of how the emulated sensors or the physical sensors actually see the environment. And so that's what we're going to focus on. I think we can get more into that here in the next slide. Yeah, so just a simple breakdown here of how we take the complex environment, and this is actually can be used in a variety of ways, and not just for lane keeping, but we focus on our target. And then we focus on basically two other aspects of the target. You can have the background component and the foreground component. And I think if you advance the slide one more time here, and maybe even, yeah, exactly, thank you. So this can be used for actually kind of a simple model for any sensor interface, but we can use this in this case for the camera. And the target in this case would not be a vehicle or another road user, but it would be the lane. And we'd want to consider various foreground conditions. This could be things like fog. It could be things like debris on the actual road, anything between the target and the camera, as well as we can also consider the background conditions that is kind of behind the target. Those two things kind of help either make the target more obvious, more perceptible, or not. Yep, keep going to the next slide. So we can break this down for the example that we came up with for lane keeping. For example, on the left side, you see various road background conditions, and we're basically trying to draw some distinct boundaries between backgrounds that are very easy for the target to be seen, and again, in terms of a camera perception, a level 2 background that might be sort of moderately difficult or average, and a third classification that could be very, very difficult. We do the same thing with foreground. We can take all sorts of various infinite combinations of rain, snow, fog, sand, etc., and we can organize those into, is this making it very easy to detect all the time? Is this an average or nominally difficult? Or is this an extremely difficult foreground condition? And likewise, the actual target, the lane itself, may have varying degrees of difficulty. You could have freshly painted lines. You could have normally kind of faded lines, etc. Or you could have almost non-existent. Yep, you can keep moving on. And so, one example is, how we can actually quantify this and make this more relevant. Again, not for necessarily our own perception, but really for the perception of the camera. There's various characteristics and KPIs that will be useful for cameras. We're just showing an example here of contrast ratio, but you could look at example for pixel rise distance, which indicates the sort of fuzziness. You could look at, the longitudinal properties of the lane or the target to describe, how normal that the brightness is centered around a particular value, or the color centered around a particular value. This is just one example of showing how we can, quantify in terms of what's relevant for the sensor, but also what's relevant for our environment. Next slide. And yeah, so again, it's just been great to work with NVIDIA, who specializes in virtual simulations, as well as 3D mapping, who specializes in physical road measurements. And then what the retrospect brings, we're functional safety specialists. We're bringing the safety requirements, and one of the key aspects of the requirements is being able to show that we meet a certain performance under certain conditions. And so the end goal here is to show that the actual data that was been collected in the real world can be fall into these categories that we've been laying out, and therefore we give a sort of a simplified yet comprehensive and complete framework on which we can validate the performance of the lane detection system. And I think that's about it. There may have been a couple other points that Barnaby wanted to mention, but happy to answer any questions later on.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And yeah, let's close this overview of Workgroup 3. And I think it's time right now to hand over to Eddie for Workgroup 4.
There he is. Okay.
Yeah. like the rest of the team, I'm struggling with this new platform. So
thank you.
Just a second here. Cool. So I will share my screen in a moment. Just a second. Can you see it in the presentation mode? Is it in the presentation mode, or is it like the rest of the gang?
So try one more time, and then it should be. Yeah,
I thought that I'm special and I'm going to make it from the first time, but no, I'm not.
Okay.
You will make it as everybody. Just stay cool.
Yeah, well, now that you said it, Alex, I'm starting to shake.
Stop sharing again, and maybe share again, and then select the full screen sharing.
Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Perfect. Yes, it is.
Yeah, here we go.
Perfect. All right. Okay. So now that a bit breakdown for IT arrangements. That's a very good segue to the hot topic of cybersecurity, and particularly cybersecurity in automotive domain and testing elements of cybersecurity in automotive domain. Working for our topic or our mission is actually to come with best practices and understanding of the automotive cybersecurity testing, and which is super relevant in the new regulation scheme and the new regulation atmosphere, and very important towards in automation, autonomous driving, and IAMTS activity. So I assume that most of you, or at least people that actually been so far in the call, familiar with WP29. WP29 is the new regulation scheme came from UNEC that talks about cybersecurity, and particularly about cybersecurity in automotive domain, and it has many core content activities like cybersecurity management system and how vehicle connected services should look like, and many more cybersecurity deep requirements about how to make our components and vehicles secure in this domain of in this era of connectivity and automation. And the main goal is actually to put to security by design, to make it a thing and make it an applicable thing. This new regulation, WP29, coming from UNEC, is relevant for sure in all these green areas, which are quite spread, but moreover, that even OEM or tier that is not originated in the green areas, but willing to sell or be active in these green areas, has to be compliant with WP29. which actually makes WP29 de facto global regulation and very obliging one. As you can see, WP29 going to be obligation actually in the mid of next year, which is around the corner in an automotive time span for new vehicles types. And in 2024, it's going to be applicable for all vehicles manufactured. So it's real and it's around the corner and it's very mandatory. I don't want to go into all the details of this new regulation about cybersecurity for the automotive domain. And as many other regulations in that field, it is composed of processes, about organizational structures, about having the cybersecurity officer, and so on and so forth. It has documentation requirements and documentation needs. And it has technical per se security requirements on the how the security has to be made and validated on the component level. But something that is generally very much accurate for that regulation is that actually that these requirements are too abstract and thereby underspecified, and which actually makes testing of this regulation in ISO scheme very difficult and currently not well defined or not well widely accepted. And that's actually a huge challenge to the entire industry about how to test this new, very mandatory global regulation. So that's actually the problem we are trying to tackle. And we're talking about when coming from the perspective of IAMTS, we understood that there are so many different stakeholders related and involved in testing, and has something to say about regulation, standardization, testing, and actually approval of testing. And each of them has a bit different perspective, a bit different ideas about how it should be done. And frankly saying, the uniqueness or the great thing of IAMTS, and particularly something that we experience in working group 4, is that the composition of the teams and the personnel that is involved in IAMTS is the very right team to tackle that problem. As we do have companies in testing organizations and test facilities and proving grounds and regulation bodies like SAE and IEEE involved, and even suppliers and so on that are part of IAMTS members and actually willing to join IAMTS. So actually we feel that we have something that is very unique, and that's actually the capability and the right personnel and perspective to tackle that problem from a variety of angles, which is actually leads to the first project we put in our mind or on our roadmap. And the project is actually to map all the existing best practices. That's going to be our first milestone. And then to analyze all the commonalities or differences or discrepancies between them. And at the very end, not sure how far the end is, or whether it's going to be the final end, or there are going to be many different ends to that, to come with best practices about how and guidelines for harmonized cybersecurity testing. And what you see on the axis here is actually something that is particularly unique for IAMTS, and that's actually the capability of looking at that problem or that challenge more accurately from various of different perspectives. It comes from different regulatory landscapes of more self-regulated markets like the States, or type approval requirements like European markets. We have different geographies. We have people coming from Qatar and China, through TÜVs, AVL, Europe, and going all the way to the States and even South America. So, and the last part, we are trying to tackle that from different perspectives of stakeholders in the market. We have minor startups as suppliers, like solution providers like Cerbellum, and going all the way to the huge and powerful and experienced JC institutes. And having all that different perspectives, that's something that is very unique and very particularly fit to tackle that problem from our perspective. So that's what we try to do. And something that is, as we are the last comers, or the working group that was actually assembled, I believe, less than 6 months ago, or yeah, something of that sort. So we were already coming to the scene where the existing working groups are already in place. And we think that there is a lot of room for correspondence and collaboration with the other working groups. With working group 1 of actually understanding what are the cybersecurity test scenarios as part of their activity in test scenarios mapping. And working group 2 actually, as they are mapping proving grounds capabilities, it would be very useful to understand what are the cybersecurity testing capabilities of these proving grounds and so on. And of course, simulation or physical world, that's a huge question that comes upon every time that you talk about cybersecurity and particular cybersecurity testing. So we feel that there is a huge potential synergy of what we are doing in Working Group 4 and what is being, and the effort that is being conducted in the other working groups. Who are the currently participants? So these are the companies and people that are that have shown interest and joined the meetings. And we actually, as you see, it's quite a big forum. So we have split it to sub-working groups, talking about local regulations and how they correlate with the global regulation and others. But it's very premature, so we just began with that activity. So no outcome yet to present here in the forum. But what you can see that we do have one more room, or actually an entire line to add here. So which actually leads me to the point that we are very much looking and accepting and willing to increase the forum and to enable other organizations that think that this challenge of how to test cybersecurity in automotive domain in this new era where software is actually so popular and so extensively impactful. And so you are most welcome to reach out to me and to Herman Brandt, the colleague of the working group, and we would be very happy to discuss potential how you can join and how you can contribute to that activity. That's all from my end.
Thank you, Eddie. That's actually right on the point with in the timing. That's good. So I know it was a very long program, so I would like the work group leaders and subgroup leaders to make themselves available. And then thank you all the speakers, moderator, and all the participants to give us their time. We have, I think, still some time for networking, so the remote platform will still be open. I think for those of you who were there from the beginning, you saw the different tables. So if you still want to exchange and talk to some experts, you will be able to do so. And but this is now the end of the formal program. Thank you very, very much. For those of you who are interested, we have still another session tomorrow focused on the Asian market. So you will see this in the event side. I know it is a pretty odd time zone for those who are in Europe or on the East Coast of the US. Anyhow, we will record it. I just wanted to mention it to you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you very, very much. And we're looking forward to working with you and the IAMTS community in the future. Thank you very much.